We have all your handouts here. Now, we've been here for 5 years or so doing these trainings, and finally I think we're almost there where we can get the app available. So we're going to try to really go paperless the next times around. So we'll have an app where you can download it. You'll have it either on your phone or an iPad, and we'll have we're going to update those computers out there and get us some mini pads, so where as you come in, the first 25 folks can get a mini pad and just follow along if you don't have your iPad with you or another device. So we'll be doing that. Next month we're going to have TDA here. We're going to have, I believe, Amanda will be here on March 21st. We'll also have an update on E-rate. I don't have it on here yet, but I confirmed it yesterday. We'll have an update on E-rate, and we'll also have a session on real estate transactions. Anything you want to know about real estate transactions, what forms to fill out, what do they mean, and all that details when you're buying property or when you're selling property. So we'll have that on March 21st. And then April 11th, we'll have a session on bonds, and we'll try to get a lot of people dealing with bonds. And then remember, May 15 and 16, investment training. GTOT will be here for those 2 days. If you need just 1 day, it's just do the 15. If you need 2 days, it'll be the 15 and the 16. And then on the 19th, we'll try to get Omar here for budget and another speakers as we do that. And same thing, July 17, we'll focus on gas fees and statements and accounting updates. And then back again in August on purchasing law updates for the rest of the year. So, well, the certification course already passed. So we'll have other coming up sessions in the future. So remember that to do the evaluation for each speaker. So we're just in the process of renewing our CPE credits through the Texas State Board, and they really require us all day. When they ask us, they pick every year, they pick a meeting date for them to review. So they ask us all the material, including all the evaluations. So please submit those. We need to send them to the Texas State Board, where they are as part of the program that needs to be evaluated. So our first speaker today is Robert Ashton. He's a program specialist with the Economic Development and Analysis Division of the Comptrollers of Public Accounts. He's a project leader of the Local Government Transparency Program, which includes encouraging and tracking financial transparency for Texas cities, counties, school districts, special districts, and coordinating the Leadership Circle Award program. He serves in the High Plains region, consisting of 43 counties. He's BA in Economics from Rutgers, MAT from Johns Hopkins University, MA in History from Oregon, U.S. Air Force veteran, and he's worked in numerous programs. He's out of the Austin office, and again, he's here to talk to you about the transparency program. Please help me welcome Robert Ashton.
Sorry for the scratching noises here. All right. I'm glad to be here this morning. I know I have a lot of respect for people that do your job, because I went to one of the conferences that sort of explained the state system at allocating money to the school districts, and I had a splitting headache after the first 20 minutes. And I don't know how you can put up with that stuff. And it changes every year, and there's court cases, and you never know what's happening. And I don't know how you can plan a budget or do anything on that kind of thing. But I have a little bit of a history with education, because my wife and I were both teaching in a high school in New Jersey when we got married, and she happened to be from Texas. So that's how I ended up in Texas eventually. And my daughter has been a special ed teacher up in the Dallas area for 17 years now, I think. So education is important to all of us, and I just want to thank you for doing your jobs, because it's become a lot tougher than it used to be. But when I was teaching, nobody ever, I didn't know what the financial part of it was. I was just in my classroom with my kids and lesson plans and stuff, and all that other stuff was, those people up there with the suits usually took care of that. So now that I've got a little more understanding of what you do, I've got a lot more empathy for you. I'm just glad I'm not in your job. But I do appreciate you. How many of you have applied for a Leadership Circle Award with our department? All right, a couple of you. For most of you here last year, Michelle Luella gave this similar presentation. Right, so maybe a lot of this is fairly new to you. I have a PowerPoint. I'd like to keep it fairly brief, just to go over the main points of the award program. Are most of you at least familiar with the award program?
Yep.
Yes? No? The ones who have applied? Did you find it was a fairly easy thing to do? Perhaps not getting the documents posted online, but as far as applying for the award, did that process work fine for you?
It wasn't involved, I'm not sure.
All right, most of you aren't directly involved in it. All right, I'm going to start with, if I can get this working right. All right, this is basically some objectives, which we always put a couple places in continuing education credits when we do this. But our comptroller recommendations on local government financial transparency. She's a big proponent of transparency, because it's part of the way government works. And if the citizens don't know what governments are doing and they're paying the taxes, then we're not being responsible to them to let them know what's going on. I think we all appreciate transparency. When I started this 4 years ago, people said, well, what's financial transparency? Now everybody's talking about it, especially if you read the papers about Detroit and 2 or 3 cities in California and some in other parts of the country actually going bankrupt. It's become a lot bigger issue. A little bit about the benefits and risks of posting data online, how to balance openness and confidentiality. That's one of the problems and one of the risks. And how to apply for and earn as a Leadership Circle Award. Right. Our department, just a few company party line things here. We do economic impact analysis, job creation initiatives, the event trust funds, which everybody criticizes us for. If you've heard about the F1 Formula racing controversy in the Austin area. Budgeting and purchasing, and of course financial transparency. One thing that we do with tax programs and incentives, you notice in Chapter 313. Do any of you have anything to do with Chapter 313? Our department includes the economists to take those applications and keep the registry. That would be of interest. I'm not sure if, how many of you use the state purchasing co-op. Has anybody used that before?
Yeah.
All right, anyway, notice the school bus there, but we spend $99 billion a year. And so they have all sorts of contracts with vendors, and we suggest that you look out there. You can actually look out there and look at the catalog price. If you go to, I think it's Texas Smart Buy, and it's on the right side of that screen. If anybody's interested in that, we can show you later. But you could actually look at the price quoted by our vendors, and you can get an idea if it could save you money over whatever you're using now, or a lot of you are in cooperative purchasing agreements locally, so it's just a possibility. And check out the price, you might save some money there, which is important. All right, we launched the Leadership Circle program in 2009. The first full year was 2010. We just added some community colleges this year. We're in the process of getting our IT people to put a separate page to keep community colleges. And once we do that, we'll have all the major local government groups that actually either get property or sales taxes. Some of the special districts don't actually get tax revenue, they operate on fees mostly. Some of them have even come into our program too because they're trying to show their constituents that they're being open and honest. It's a voluntary program. One of the things was there were several bills submitted at the legislative level which would have required it to be done in a certain way, and they were criticized, and luckily they didn't get passed because it would have raised the cost. So I think Susan Combs' idea was to encourage it on a voluntary basis so people could find out the cheapest and the most efficient way to do it at their level. And it's not a one-size-fits-all, as all your schools are even different. There's a self-scoring nomination. We added a new level this year, and I spend most of my time talking about that, the platinum level. There was quite a bit of talk about debt at the state level during the legislative session. Susan Combs has been going around giving presentations on the amount of local debt, and I think it more than doubled at the local level since the 2008 recession hit. And so it's become a concern because if we keep that debt into the future, it's going to be higher and higher tax rates, and there's already controversies about property tax for schools, as you know. If you get an award, you get a certificate. It's good for 1 year, but the award cycle is on a year basis. So if you get an award in before December of 2014, you have an award, and that lasts 1 year, and you're posted on our website. All right, this is just our quick definition of transparency. You might think of things to add to it, but basically opening the books to the public, providing information, and I think the most important part is having a user-friendly format. We've learned that people just slapping documents up there like the CAFR or the AFR. I saw an article in the Government magazine, I think last summer, was pointing out that some accountants don't understand some of those tables and charts and some of the data that's posted in that AFR. And so, in fact, our new debt department has come up with a guide to the AFR for the public so they can go through that and figure out what it means and how they can use it. Susan always likes to talk about letting taxpayers drill down for more information, which is why we require, there's a 1 point, it's not required, but there's a 1 point criteria if you have a budget in a machine readable format such as Excel or HTML. Some of the public research groups and media like to do analyses, and if they can file it down into their system, they can compare different schools, or schools of a similar size with the different categories in the budget to see who's doing well and who's not doing well. And of course, using 21st century technology to do that. Some quick questions, maybe I'll let you answer them. These are the kind of questions we got when we did a survey back in 2009 when we started this program. I'll let you answer. How about the first one? If we put financial documents online, will anyone in our district read them? I hear this a lot. It's just an exercise in bureaucracy then if we put it out there. No comments? Nobody that feels that way? There's a lot of people on the phone I've talked to saying, well, we're doing this, but I mean, nobody's ever going to look at our website, and they're not interested in the details. And if you read as many budgets as I have, I can see people might feel that way. How about the next one? Will posting complex budgets and financial reports just confuse people? What's the answer to that one, though?
Well, make some ask questions to get you a chance to correct.
All right, it's good to have them ask questions because you can explain it to them and they have a better understanding of your financial situation. My question is, why are they so complex? Right? Can we make them simpler? I mean, maybe the TEA needs to make the rules simpler too, I'm sure. But you get bureaucracies involved. So, but I think the big secret to this is, I like the places that they put up a popular budget or a popular annual financial report. And sometimes that's maybe 8 or 10 pages, and 5 of those are some sort of pie charts or some sort of visuals showing what the tax rate has been for the last 10 years and how much tax has been collected from that property tax. And something like that, you can see it right at a glance, and you see, well, that's what's happening. It can show you the problems too that you're trying to tell them you're facing. But anyway, if you can unconfuse them by making the document simpler or making a shorter summary report. I was just mentioning that a lot of school districts, some of the ones I've seen only put their general fund budget up. Some of them put all the 3 TEA categories. A lot of them don't report other funds like federal grants and things. So I noticed I had one district that we were reporting a budget for the year of 28 million, something like that. And then when I looked at their AFR for the previous year, they had spent 63 million. I said, well, something's going on here. So I have to call them because we're checking to see that when you put your check register out there, it's a complete list of all your expenses. Because people have called us and well, we used to accept the AP check register as opening the books, and we were criticized because people said, well, if you don't put it all there, you're hiding something. And so we ask you to, when you submit for an award, to tell us that you have guaranteed that you're putting all your expenses out there. It's with some exceptions. If you have some places have cities have power contracts with a provider that's in the competitive market, and giving the value of that contract away would be sometimes giving their competition some inside information that they can use. So, but there are some things we don't want to put online. What about the last question? Does it take you a lot of effort to put it online? Put this information out there? Those of you that have applied for an award, did it take you a lot of time to get those documents out? How much time does it take? Nobody wants? Didn't have your coffee this morning?
I think one thing that's difficult is not everything we pay is through an AP check register. So there's a lot of piloting time of other pieces of data to get that out there.
Now, that's why we changed it. We changed it in our documents from check register to check/expense register. So what's most often missing is like your payroll, your salaries. And you don't want to put the detail out there because you're running all sorts of confidential information about the deductions and things. So what we ask is that you just report that in some way. Some people just put the payroll clearing account for salaries that they send to they send to the bank every month or every payroll period. The other thing is there's a lot of ACHs and EFTs and bank wires, whatever they call them. There's all sorts of electronic payments now. So in some cases, if you're regular, some of the better accounting systems pick up all of this. It has one check register, and at the bottom you'll see it says payroll, bank wires, and ACHs, and all that, and then checks. So it's got all those different kind of expenses. If you don't have that, what we recommend is that you pull in those other kind of expenses. It's pretty easy to do a payroll distribution list of what you pay in each payroll cycle through the year, all the months of the year, each payroll, and the total amount going to payroll. It's a little more open. We accept that. It's a little more open to the public if you break it down and you said you paid this much for taxes and this much for which benefits and that kind of stuff. But if you put it all out there someplace in a separate file, or whether your accounting system picks it up, it doesn't matter. But the most common reason I have to call back to somebody that they don't meet that criteria. And incidentally, if you submitted an application to us and you check off on the score sheet the criteria you've met and you don't meet all those, we usually call and we'll give you a chance to remedy the situation. So it's not, if you submitted it and you didn't get them all, you get a bronze or you get a silver instead of a gold. We will call you and tell you about it. And if you want to remedy it, they'll say, well, can you give me a week or two to do this? We'll give you up to a month to remedy that and then continue processing it. So it's not I guess like when you apply for college, if you don't get in the first time, you're out. Anyway, I hope it doesn't. Most people told us in the survey that to do all these three main documents that Susan recommends, the budget, the annual report, which is only once a year for each of those, basically, and then the check expense register. Those are the three key documents that we're asking for. Most people said even the ones that had to do some extra, that it was usually no more than 3 to 4 hours a month at the most. So it's not a laborious thing. I think schools are better off than some of the cities and counties, because a lot of the cities maybe have a staff of 2 or 3, they don't have an IT department. Most of you have the ESCs, or technical people on your staff that can do this. All right, there's the recommended documents, and we added one more thing this year, debt information. And I'll talk about that in a minute. There's the 3 award levels that we had in the past and the new platinum level. And to get to the platinum, you need all the points that you would have needed to get to the gold level, plus you have to have debt information posted. You should have a link to our CPA website, which I'll show you in a minute, and also a signed copy of a bond pledge that just says you will notify our new debt people if you have a bond election coming up. Right now, they're pretty well stuck with the information they've gotten from the bond board, and some of it has been inaccurate. So they were trying to get a better direct connection with you when you have a bond election, so they can keep up to date on that. Here's the nomination score sheet. There's 8-point criteria for having the 3 documents and a transparency page. You notice a transparency page is one web page where you can find all the recommended documents and debt information, or links to those. If it's just one page you can go to, and you can go from there to all your financial information. If you haven't done this before, there's minor points. We had 12 last year. We didn't want to make this get to 30 points or something like that when we added debt, so we reduced 2 of them. That's sort of where we've done them. But direct contacts for elected officials. In your case, that would be the board of trustees, I would assume. Surprising, a lot of those people run for election, but they don't want their constituents to call them. There's a lot of places miss that because they say, well, we can't get them to give us a phone number, or they don't want their email, online. But, you can do an email online that goes to them, and it's probably some assistant in their office that answers it. It should be a direct contact, not a secretary in the administrative office that gets the calls. In public, this is one of the things in schools. I was surprised. A lot of schools had nothing originally on their websites that let the public know there's a public information system, and that if somebody from the public submits an open record request, they can get public documents. And all we request is that you put something out there that tells the public they have a right to request public records and some sort of contact number. Most places have a form to use to apply, and some of them have a direct link to the AG's office where they have the Public Information Act and all the rules and stuff like that. But that's a little bit overkill because it's reading all the codes from state statutes, which is like reading French or Arabic or something. And the most recent budgets for 3 years, and the most recent CFRs or AFRs for 3 years. And of course, the check expense register. The major criteria only apply to the most current documents. So if you have, in the past, you were just putting up an AP check register, that would count for having 3 years. Descriptive check expense register. If there's a purpose, a lot of places can't pull that from their accounting system, so it's only a one-point item. But if you have that, that's a little bit, it might save you from some phone calls from the public wondering why you're spending $60,000 to such and such person in the community, and perhaps you're renting property or doing something or buying some property. But anyway, if it has a purpose, there's only 4 items that we require. And again, this idea between openness and confidentiality, we checked with the State Department of Banking, and they suggest just 4 things that the public needs. The date of the check, the payee on the check, the amount, and the last one is if you have a brief description. I noticed some places have contractor numbers, check numbers, lots of other information out there, which just confuses the public because they don't care about the contractor number, but it would give hackers some information that if they correlate this data with some other things that they've hacked into, they could duplicate a check or get somebody's identity. So we suggest you keep it down to this, the public check register that's posted would be just those 4 items.
And the 4 items, yeah, what are they?
Just the date, the payee, the amount, and if possible, a purpose. If you only have the first 3, we give you credit for the check expense register.
So the purpose separate from description. Right, the purpose is different from.
Yeah, in description, yeah, it should be, like some places just have account codes,
Okay, so
but you're looking at, and if you don't have, even if you have a table explaining what they were, the person's got a cross-reference and doesn't really say what this specific, if it's supply.
It doesn't need to be a narrative purpose.
Yeah, it's just maybe a 25 like in the art supplies, you know, a border category might do, yeah, as long as there's some sort of idea of what the purpose was. Of course, this is important, the current tax rates for local option taxes. We just mainly have property taxes. Cities, some of them have sales taxes and property taxes, hotel taxes. They're adding all sorts of taxes because we don't have an income tax in Texas, so you've got to get it from some other tax. All right, that's the minimum. So with the 2 points we left out, the other one was we used to need 3 clicks to the documents. And we figured if you can get there, just going to a financial transparency page, it's easy enough for the public to find it. And we got some that were 4 clicks and it was sort of picky, so we eliminated that. But it does take, not only now gives you two sort of free points that if you make 18, the 8 points above and 8 out of the 10, then you get to the gold level. I'll go over that. Here's our definition of debt, and this is a long story. They got the legal department involved, and they spent 6 months arguing about what is debt. Sounds simple to the layperson, but they finally decided that there's so many types of debts, and the different entities use all sorts of different types of debts that they would use the definition in that section of the government code. And basically, it's some sort of a public security, as defined there, which is secured by property taxes. And I'm going to add a line. And the next thing shows it's not just property taxes, but it's property taxes that have been approved by the voters. And I know in one of our counties up there, they were, I think, it's either Travis or Williamson, they were going to build a new jail, they put it out to the voters voted down. Then the county commissioners decided, well, we're overcrowded, and the federal government's getting on us, and people are going to sue us, so we need to build this jail. So they did it by approving it with a resolution and putting out certificates of obligation, which is not quite, our staff didn't think that's very good, but getting around the idea. But the idea is that the no taxation without representation, heard that in U.S. history. Anyway, you can get around it. So, but this definition does not include all those things. So if it's not secured by property taxes and hasn't been voted on by the voters, any of these other types of things, they don't count toward the platinum award. But what we recommend is that you put it out there and tell the public you have all these debts. We don't give any points for it, but as long as you report any of that strictly defined kind of debt, and what mostly you issue bonds, right?
Yeah.
Most schools issue bonds, and they have to go to the voters, which is why the
No.
no.
You talking about a bond authorization or a tax rate?
Both. We're talking about debts, so if
Yeah, but we don't have to have voter approval on debt rate.
not the debt rate.
No.
Yeah.
Not school district.
Unless it's above the rollback rate.
Correct.
Yeah. All right, but we're talking about bonds. Most bonds that schools issues, you have to put it out to the voters.
You
Because I
have
see
to
it
get
happen
a
all the
bond
time.
authorization. You have to have a bond authorization,
Yeah.
and that's voter approved.
Yeah.
Yeah, districts issue COs too, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But you made it sound like it was,
Well, the way the county did it in our area,
okay.
it was sort of going around the will of the voters, but it is hard to get, incidentally, I've had a couple of school districts tell me that when we first started, that they had been putting all these documents out there on the internet for several years, and they felt that it was important when they did bond issues and got some new schools built, but they said they felt that being transparent, they had the confidence in the voters in the community, and it made it a lot easier for them to get those bonds passed. So that's one of the benefits that you get out of this transparency. But anyway, it's a very, this took 6 months of arguing to get these facts up here with the legal department, so, but it's very confusing, but
I'm interested, you're able to issue COs?
School districts?
Yeah.
Sure,
Really?
absolutely.
How?
We used to issue COs for buses. You can still do it if you want. Yeah,
We did it for telephone system once.
I mean, it's,
like
we go through our financial advisor and, like if I wanted to build an elementary and use COs, or what if I wanted, maybe not an elementary, but if I wanted to do,
It's out of the, you're talking maybe a contractual obligation, not a CO.
well, CO, that's what I'm talking about. That's a contractual obligation.
Okay, so they're different than the certificate of obligation. A certificate of obligation is mostly the ones that issue those are cities and counties. You're talking about a PPFCO, public property finance contractual obligation. Those I think we all can issue.
Oh, well, I guess then I don't know. When he said COs, that's what we call them, and if they're different than what he's referring to, you know.
Yeah, they're different than a certificate of obligation. Those are usually done by a city or a county for like water and sewer improvements, when they don't have to go to the voters.
What did you call it, a P something?
PPFCO.
What's PPF?
Finance property, public property finance contractual obligation. The technical name under the code, but they're contractual obligations like a maintenance note.
Yeah.
and that's why it took us 6 months to work out this definition right there. Because that's when it's stuff.
I was interested in that because then actually we can use the CO's obligation. I just never had the ability to do that.
Anyway, what we're recommending is, if you have debts that don't fit this strict definition, we recommend you report them to the public because, you know, you're paying it somehow in the budget and it's just part of being open and transparent with them. But if you had to explain it to the public, I don't know, that may cause you some problems in having to explain it because there's so many different types of debt. All right, this is the link to our website. I'll take you there in a minute. This is the pledge. There's somebody high up, maybe the chief financial officer, who signed this. Just signs a pledge that you send that in with your nomination that you'll inform us about any bond elections so that our department can keep their page up to date. Here's the criteria for the platinum. You have to have all three things. You have to have the information on the debt, something about the description, the purpose. Like most of you have bond series, and we have some. I think Round Rock was built. You know, I think they built 5 schools in 1 year, and they've had a bond issue every year since 1999 or something like that. But they have this listed, and they have a paragraph. This was to build 2 new schools and a new gym for high school. Just a short paragraph saying what that bond was for, and then having some information about the maturity schedule, how long it's going to take you to get that paid off. We decided we were thinking about a standard format for doing this, but when we looked, everybody was doing it a little bit differently. But what we'd like to encourage, since this is the first time, what we're trying to do is encourage you to be creative and find good ways to get this information to the public that's fairly understandable. And one of the things I like best is they show a list of all the debt bond issues maybe on a column on the left, and then they have the years going from 2014 to 2035, and the total debt payment each year until all those debts were paid off. And that gives the public an idea of what's going to happen, and is this going to make my debt? Some of these have raising requirements, so by 1920 you're paying, instead of paying $500,000 a year, you're paying $5 billion a year. And that's going to affect the voters' tax rate at least.
If you already have that schedule, it's already listed in the CAFR, why would you put it separate here?
You don't need a separate, you just put a link to those pages of the CAFR on your financial transparency page, and then it's very easy for the public to find. So if you've already got it out there, the transparency page doesn't have all the documents right there, but if you have a link to the documents there, and if it's in your budget, you've already done it, that's great. All right, but you have to have all three. You have to have a description of the debts, some sort of, some way of telling them the maturity dates and when they'll be paid off, and then a link to our site, which most of you have if you've gotten the award already, and then this pledge page, and that's 4 points total. If you don't have any debt, I don't think there's too many schools in Texas that are in that situation, but you've got 3 that have earned an award already this year, that's cities that don't have any debts. You just need a statement that you have no current bond debt secured by property taxes, and then that meets that definition. And then the link to our site, and then the pledge that if you do have bonds, you won't renew the bonds. Here's the criteria, the new criteria this year. We used to have there's 22 points available if you look at the, I think you all have the packet with the scoring sheet on it. Basically, we haven't changed anything except there's instead of a total of 12 minor points, there's only 10. But you have just 2 of the 3 key documents and 4 minor points is the bronze, 2 of the 3 key documents and a financial transparency page, and 6 minor criteria gives you the silver. Actually, about 85 to 90% of our awards have been gold, so most people can get the gold fairly easy. But you need all 3 key documents, a financial transparency page, and 8 minor criteria. So you've got 2 throwaway points that you don't have to get. And then if you get the gold level and you have all 4 platinum points, then you get the platinum level. So it's not too hard. We have some tips out there. There's frequently asked questions. We're going to be putting some, we have some success stories, and I think we're going to try to write up as an example of some successful black platinum awards with handling debt. We'll try to make some news stories on here's how some people have handled that in a creative way. You get the recognition on our transparency website, and you get the leadership of Insignia. I would like to finish with this. Government is the servant and not the master of the people. Each person is entitled to complete information about the affairs of government and the official acts of public officials and employees. Does anybody know where that comes from? This is actually the preamble to the Texas Public Information Act. What's it, PBIA, whatever. Anyway, that's the preamble. This was done back in the early 1990s by a nonpartisan legislature. So this is, but I think it's a statement of what government is all about. And that's why we're encouraging transparency. And if you look at places like what's going on in Russia, and in some places in the world, you have to admit this is a better principle to follow than where you have a government where some elite knows everything about it, and let us take care of these problems. Don't worry your minds about it. But in democracy, it works different. We've got to be accountable to our public. I'd like to switch to our website. And are there any volunteers in here that have either have submitted for an award or planning to submit for an award? What I was thinking is we could look at your website. Yeah, here's just a minute. I've got to do that next week when I get back to the office.
You can evaluate your record.
You can evaluate mine right now.
All right, you're going to be getting good. Appreciate that.
Get on the way out the door.
First, we're going to show this is the debt. They got all sorts of information, and you could go, hopefully look by county and see what the debts are.
Where are we located at? I couldn't find the...
Oh, you couldn't find yours? This is a work in progress, so they may not have all the debts, but from what they had, this is interesting. It's a changing population. But, here's the debt trends. Here's, let me see. And then they've got comparison with some other counties. Here's the little understanding comprehensive annual financial reports, which is, I think, is a real good step for helping the public understand what's going on. Here's Harris County bonds. So these, again, they have found some of the figures that we got from the State Bond Board were not quite accurate, but they were trying to update these. They think by the end of this year they'll have fairly good. And we've classified you guys as an ISD, so I'm gonna look for. Well, there we go. If I can stay on the right page here. They don't have you listed for any debt.
Well, not debt from the debt service side, we
Yeah.
have debt on the.
Let's see, which one?
Your part.
Deer Park. Let's see.
We're up. I know we're up.
They do have, yeah, this is whatever the bond board gave over to our department, so. All right, there's Deer Park. Just a little paragraph there. All right, so you got 225 million. Wow, that's a pretty good size of the debt there. Of course, your annual budget's probably what, close to $1 billion?
Our annual budget?
Yep.
About 110 million.
Well, that looks like a big amount to me.
That's not big at all.
That's not big.
No. You want
We
big?
wish we had
Hey,
that.
if you want big, pull mine up.
That's 2029.
Unlike the general public, if it's, you know, I think of my mortgage payment, the debt on my house is a big debt, you know? And so, when you go out here, you see millions of dollars, so.
You know, we have an aging infrastructure in the state of Texas with facilities and with
Yeah.
adding 75,000 kids a year.
And less money from the legislature,
I mean,
yeah.
this is not, we're not living in Las Vegas or Arizona or other states where they don't have kids growing. I mean, a lot of kids coming to the state. We have a lot of people coming to the state. That's why there's a lot of debt out there.
I found that out when I appreciate Jesus's traffic problem, because I drove in traffic here last night and got lost. There was construction and, you know, lights, and I missed about 3 turns. It took me an hour to find the motel when I got here. So I really, yeah, our traffic problem, I think both Austin and Houston are listed in one of the 5 worst cities for traffic in the country, I think. So anyway, it does have it has a lot of information that's really unique for the public. The debt per student, it changed by negative, is that a negative? No, it's a positive. Yeah. Anyway, it gives all this snapshot. But I like this approach because it's sort of a quick snapshot approach, you know, to keep it simple, you know, and the public, it's usable to the public. If you get them too many details, now some of the public research agencies and the media will want to look into the details, but you don't need to give too much for the public itself. And they can always, you know, submit an open records request if they're doing research and they want more data.
Where is this information?
They got most of this out of from the state bond board.
Who is they?
We have a new department in our IT department that's maintaining these debt pages. Yeah, we don't do it, but we're coordinating with them. So that's one of the reasons we put that pledge form. They want to make sure they get the information up front so they can keep these figures accurate. And it doesn't take much to notify us.
It's on the comptroller's website. It's a piece of that.
Yeah, this is on our transparency website. Now I can back out and I'll show you where we got. But it's on www.texastransparency.org, which is the same place we have the listing of all the Leadership Circle awards. In fact, all the links, if we have a link to a local government website, whether it has an award or not, we're trying to put it out there. Anyway, this compares, any questions about this? This compares Deer Park to some of the other school districts of similar size. And so you've got this nice list here. Grapevine is up there with a pretty high debt too. But you can practically go through the list and see the ones that are growing the most rapidly and having the most new residents moving in. So.
Well, remember our schools, a lot of them are 60 years old. So the heating, the air conditioning, the electricity.
Even if you're not growing, you got
technology. I mean, none of that's there. So if you don't have debt, that means you're not keeping up.
All right, is this accurate that we were hearing for Deer Park?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I think you've been keeping up and reporting to the bond board regularly. So anyway, any other questions on this part? But I suggest you go out and look at
Yeah, put Klein up there.
Klein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right there.
All right, here we go with Klein and Bolden. Wow, 32% gain in enrollment versus 15% for the statewide. I mean, that's, you can tell you're growing. 42 Campbell. It's a big school district. How do you keep it under control? Tracking, I can see tracking expenses for a district that size, you must go crazy. There's your outstanding debt. Well, you've got 3 times as much as they have. All right, I can see what you're talking about.
So I would go down and look at the comparables. That's what I was interested in.
Louisville, over $1 million. Over $1 billion.
Bill, AD.
A-lifts. See, Round Rock is pretty high, but that's the one in our area that I know. Socorro, United. And Frisco is up there. Now that used to be a little tiny country town about 10, 20 years ago. Now it's a huge place.
Yeah.
All right.
You know, Texas school districts are faced with, in a lot of these older campuses, just bulldozing them over and rebuilding. Because it doesn't make sense to renovate a campus that you're going to spend more to do that than you would just if you bulldoze it down. So even though you may not be growing in enrollment, a building's not going to last you but maybe 50 years. The infrastructure in it. So you know, that's, and then of course with enrollment growing, I mean, you know how much a high school costs these days? If you have to build a high school?
No idea.
150 million.
Wow. That's another reason I'm glad I don't have your job. But I think this might help you get some of those things across to the public, because the public doesn't understand that. They see a bond issue and they say, all they want is more money. They're spending it all on athletics. You know, you get all these myths going on in the community. So I appreciate when you're trying to float bond issues to get these things paid for. It's a problem.
But it looks like your information is very accurate in terms of, you know, the outstanding debt. So that's good. That's good.
Well, when we put this up, I think early in January, maybe in December, and they got like about a dozen calls from someplace that it wasn't accurate. So check it out for your school district if you haven't. And if it isn't accurate, you know, send us an email and we'll get it corrected. All right, let's see. There's a. Let me go back. And here's where we started. Texas Transparency. And you can get state. Now, incidentally, we have all the Susan's Home started in getting the state all $100+ billion of state fund, you know, extending on that as well. So, in fact. We need to thank you because we've been ranked, I think, in the Sunshine Awards. They do a national nonprofit that looks at states and local government transparency and these awards. And we've been ranked #1 for 2 years in a row. Not just because of what the state does, because they look also, one of the criteria is the amount of local government transparency. So we're probably one of the leaders in the country in this. So, and hopefully, you know, I think it'll gain us a lot more trust from our constituents, just for being open. So anyway, you might look around here. Let me just show you our leadership circle. And I want to go to the, and you notice we have cities, counties, and here's where we have public education.
What's the time frame for applying for that after your fiscal year? How many months till?
And you have until, if you want to apply for a 2014 award, you have to get it in by December 31st. We may move it up a little bit because we have, right now we have a backlog of about 30 nominations that we have to process.
December for the year that.
And that'll be for 2014 award, but it's good for 12 months. In other words, if you apply, say December 1st and you get an award, it's good till December 1st, 2015. but it's a 2014 award.
Based on which data?
On the day you submit it, and of course, if you submit one, you promise to keep that site up for the remainder of the year. This is just a little bit about school districts funding. I'll get to the next level here. I'm going to look up this is back to debt. Let me get back here. I think they have to update Susan Combs' little thing. I haven't gotten onto it except from our internal system, so it works a little bit differently. There is the local. And I'm going to look up all results. All right, you have each list, and you notice it's probably pretty small on the screen, but all right, here's Harris County Department of Education. So you notice this is what the public sees. Here's the ones. All right, so they've been in the system for all 4 years, and they've gotten the gold all 4 years. And the public can see this, that you've been transparent. And if they get one for 2014, it'll be added to the list.
We want the perfect score.
Now, where is
it by 1 point?
any other school districts you want to look at yours? And you go to Deer Park also. But we had all two of them. It was 1,035 when we started. I think it's like 1,033 now because there's been some consolidations. But
Does it mean when there's a column that says not applicable instead of a date? You see some not applicable?
oh, they have not submitted for an award.
So they're on there because they exist. And so-
They have a website. Here's the links to their documents, but they only have one document up, so they're probably not eligible for an award yet, and they haven't put any more up. So that's small district Decatur out west of Dallas. Yeah, and here's De Leon. Anyway, here's Deer Park, and they've got 4 years of gold awards as well. Any other questions? I'm taking too much time. If any of you would like, if you've got some time between now and maybe 11:15, I can hang around for a while if you want to look at your own school. Are there any other computers we can get to the internet around the building?
Right there.
Oh, right there. All right, so if you want to look at your own site and you can go through it and sort of rate it together and see what you learn right now and what you might need to add, you can do that. Anyway, I've taken enough of your time, and thank you for coming, and thank you for doing your jobs. They're very important.
Thank you, Robert. There. Okay. The next slide is just basically an announcement, not too much as a presentation. You have in your packet a handout just like this from Act Point KPI. This is a benchmarking project that we have asked this firm to undertake and help us to pilot a benchmarking project for school districts. It is a way to compare data and be able to look at the software. It has a lot of capabilities of very similar to eFax, but except it goes a little bit more beyond that. Some of the data that doesn't get collected by the state that probably resides in your district, and sometimes you wanna compare with other districts. This company has been working with the Council of Great City Schools, and there's some members like Houston ISD, Dallas. I believe Dallas is also part of the group that they participate in this project or more on an ongoing basis. So they opened it up so that we can have a project for school districts. So this is looking at metrics developed by the Council of Great Schools. And so the project will entertain custodial workload, average age of fleet, workers' comp per employee, accounts payable cost per 100,000 revenue, and IT bandwidth per student. There's a timeline to sign up on the survey on February the 24th, and it'll close until March the 7th. If you go to the website where it says transact.com, I'll show you what it looks like so you can see. It's just basically how it requires your name and information to sign up. So all it is a form where you choose your enrollment and the name of contact information, and then it'll give you access. So this survey just, once you sign up as a school district, it'll give you the access to put in your data, and then that data will get collected as a group, and they'll issue out a report and you can compare to the different districts. We're sending it out to all the districts that are available in Texas, so hopefully as many people will join in and we can be able to compare some of the data. It's got some other capabilities for benchmarking and looking at analyzing financial data that comes from our teams, and so I think the expansion of this has potential, but this was just a way for you to kind of get familiar with it, look at it, and see if that's something that you may want to utilize to do some benchmarking for your district. Any thoughts or questions on that before we go into our next presenter? Okay, yeah.
I'm sorry, I haven't read a lot about that stuff, but so when would we be able to start getting benchmark data?
You can do that right now, just sign up. As soon as you sign up, you'll get the ability to capture the data. It's a questionnaire, basically. You go to your staff and you answer the questions, you key it in, it assigns you a number for your district. Now, the number of the district is going to be kind of it's not going to show your name, it's going to show a number so that to protect your district. They'll just say a district of 45,000, and so that way you compare with others. And so once you click send, and as soon as everybody else says, you'll show all the everybody else's information on there.
So
and
the more
you can
people
start.
that get on,
The more people that get on there, the more that you'll be able to compare yourself to. Again, these are just 5, pieces of information that might help you also for the budget. Now, HISD uses this on a systematic basis. They use this metric to evaluate departments, and so they use that more for the budgeting process. So as they're doing that, that's kind of the ultimate type of use. Once you look at it, you're going to see, well, you know, I'd like to see this, I'd like to see that. It may interest you in other benchmarking. It's got about, I want to say about 200 other measurements that you can do. But you can almost devote yourself a whole full time on it. I mean, and it's like eFacts. I mean, you can go on there and you can, you know, spend days just doing that. So, but if you can just be selective, let me show you what I did with mine and what kind of interests me in doing this, because as I was doing financial statements preparation for our board, they kind of didn't know, okay, so what does that mean? You have a number, you have a revenue and expense, but what does that mean? Is that good or bad? So what I developed in our financial statements is some benchmark. What I like to do is follow up with some benchmarks at the end of the year that will identify some of those things. Let me show you a sample of one of our reports that I'll show you December. These are our monthly financials for our board. And when I get to, let me see if I'm sorry. As I present the information to them, these are just numbers. For you and I, this is everything, right? We know what that means. We know because we work on it every day. A board member sometimes doesn't work with this all the time, so it's just another number. But what if we look at some financial ratios and what do they mean? Am I doing good? Am I not doing good? So what I created is just, now it takes me our staff a little while to get this done. I'd rather just push a button and wham, it's there. But, so I created some ratios so I can identify, right, well, our unassigned fund balance as a percentage of general expenditures, in this case, is 97%. Well, how are we doing that? Well, we budgeted 26% and I explained to them, well, you know, as the number at the bottom grows, it's going to get to be the 26% and so on. So they can kind of see the progression every month as we make those presentations to the board. Same thing with the working capital ratio. So I only created about 6 to 8 release ratios so that they can get familiar with, well, how do I evaluate the data? It's just not the raw data there. It's what does it mean? Is it good? Is it bad? Are we doing better or not? So the other piece here, fund balance ratio, debt to income ratio, and how are we doing with in compared to the budget. Now, the other thing that, you know, I thought, well, you know, they're just listening to me and they're not paying too much attention to it, but actually last month they said, you know, you show us where you're at with the budget, but can you now show us where we're at with a year ago at the same time? So now I have to add another bubble there to identify, okay, how are we doing with in this ratio compared to the same time last year. So I've added a few more of those. And so every month we go through these. Tax revenue to total revenue, for us it's about 22%, and so we're at 15% right now. So they say, okay, we're within where we think we're going to be at. Or indirect cost ratio, we budgeted 5, we're at 3%. Okay, we're almost there. So they can gauge that as we're moving along. Now, all these ratios, we have to spend time during every month to prepare those. If I just had a system where just put in the data and then voila, they're there. So that's why I was getting interested in more of these ratios and software that will just migrate the data and I'll be able to just produce it automatically. Show you a couple more. And then I go into the financial statements. So they're only about 8 ratios that are produced on our finances. So, okay. Please, if you like to participate, let your CFO know so that we can have a good survey and comparison, so that we can use that data as we move forward in the budget. We're about 10:15, 10:16 right now. Let's take about a 5-minute break, and we're going to get the Speaker Brusso up here so we can get started on federal funds. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go get started with our next presenter, which you're going to be here for until 1 o'clock, 1-ish. Yeah. Right around 11:30, so maybe halfway point, we'll get our food in, and so we'll break and get our food and then come back. So we'll just need to do a little bit of a break at that point in time. This next session, I've asked Bruce to be here. Thank you for being here, Bruce. He does presentations and updates on accounting and federal funds requirements. And this last December, I want to say that 27, 28, something like that, federal government issued their circular supplement for changes to the OMB circular 87 and 133, so it made a few changes there. So it's fairly new and recent, and so we asked them to come over. Some of those things, probably your auditors are going to be receiving that, and probably as you get audited at the end of the year with that information, they'll be applying this part of the information. So known Bruce for so many years from Austin and in Laredo and other places. So he's familiar with accounting and federal funds. So please help me welcome Bruce Collier from Edmonds.
Thanks, Jesus. Let me get rigged up here real quick. You know, the interesting part of Mr. Ashton's presentation was that he was talking about aggregate stuff. You know, how much can we summarize this so it'll be meaningful to our constituents? And one of the questions that was asked was, does anybody really need the detail? Well, I got the other end of the stick. We're going to talk in here about the detail that you have to have, because as you all know, you can't just tell the federal government, we spend a little bit of money here and a little bit of money there. They want to know exactly what you spend it on. And so we're going to be focusing on the detail. Now, also, Jesus mentioned that this is going to be relevant for auditors, and indeed that's true. How many of y'all have been an auditor at one point in time? All right, we have. Boy, how did we get that many auditors into the school districts? Well, the auditors are, yes, going to be very involved with this, but as a result of these new changes that Jesus has just mentioned, there's going to be a very extensive involvement of the school district personnel. And as you already know, your federal programs directors have a lot of things to do. They have to monitor the maintenance of effort and things like that. Well, so now the guidelines that we have from the auditor's perspective for what they're supposed to audit are going to transfer over, and we're going to look at the competence of the auditee. That's a very significant new part of this. And so you're going to have to be able to document that you have the capabilities of understanding what the auditors have audited and expressed an opinion on. And if you don't have that capability, then it could mean that your independent auditor is no longer independent, because you're basically putting them in as a manager, a part of management in your team. And so if that's the case, then they can't be independent. They can't audit their own work. They can't manage the enterprise that they're auditing. That's just kind of a basic rule. And in fact, a little while ago, Jesus was going to put his records up there and critique them. And he said, "You want me to critique my own?" Yeah, I'd like to do that. So we're going to look at that. I have some additional things here. I'd like to express my thanks to Elizabeth. She's been Elizabeth Montes. You all probably deal with her, maybe don't know you're dealing with her, but she was awfully good about putting the handout together for me. But there's a page that I needed to put in there. I didn't know I needed to at the time I gave it to Elizabeth, but we need to put it in, and you can just pass it down if you'd like to do that. It's just one page, and so if you take one, it deals with some provisions that are now available on your internet from TEA related to the determination of maintenance of effort. And I don't know if y'all have been familiar with this in the past or in recent past, but that's been a crapshoot, being responsible for the maintenance of effort stuff. We didn't know exactly how they wanted us to calculate maintenance of effort. And to give you a secret, they didn't know either. So the key thing here is that now you will have a great deal more responsibility for this. And part of what we'll talk about in here will be how that responsibility occurs. I think Jesus was brilliant to have this on Valentine's Day, and as he did, I'd like to say Happy Valentine's Day to you all. We've had a change in our business. EDMIS, my company and my wife's company, we're now an incorporated enterprise. And so now that we're a corporation, we have to have somebody as president and somebody as vice president. I ended up getting to be vice president, and my wife is my boss. So I'm going to say, will you be my Valentine? Now you all heard her say, you embarrassed me to death and you're going to die. Okay, well, since we started out with some changes, what I'd like to do is talk about a few of the other changes that are going on here. The title you have in your handout for this is new A133 and A87 provisions. Well, yes, we do have new provisions for A87 and A133, but they're proposed at this stage. And Jesus mentioned the date, December 27th or something like that. They were adopted, and it's been published in the Federal Register for some time, but in the Federal Register it says, upon implementation, here's what you're going to have to do. And I've been searching for a place where it says, it's now time to implement. And I think, in fact, we're going to implement in little bits here. So what I'm going to do is call this proposed, but I'm going to invite you all, if you find out, or if you know, and Jesus is not in the room right now, but if he knows that it has now been declared it's to be implemented, then I need to know that, because we'll scratch out proposed there, and we'll say the single audit requirements on it, because that's going to change. But again, I think it's going to come in segments, and I believe as we go through this, you'll understand why I think that's going to be the case. But what we're going to try to do at EDMIS is do our very best to help you all make sure that as we go through this, we keep you as informed as possible. Jesus also said that they are now going to have something new here at Harris County Department of Education, where you can download some stuff, like instead of our printing out a bunch of handouts for you, you download them and you bring them on your iPad, and then you'll have them here. It'd be a lot easier to see things on your iPad in front of you than looking up here, wouldn't it? And so we did that last year with NBIS. A lot of our handout material we decided we would download for people. And I found out that a lot of people, when we're having an in-house presentation, a lot of people don't print it out. They download our material and they just bring their iPads. A few people print it out, and in the year that has just closed, we always printed enough copies to give 5 or 10 people a copy in case they hadn't had a chance to print theirs out. But we're going to continue to do that. Most of our CPE we're also doing right now on an internet basis. We call it WebView, You can sign up for it on our website. You get enrolled in it, and we send you information. And you'll be seeing exactly on the screen at your office the same stuff that we're doing here in this. The nice thing is you don't have to look at me. You can just work right there on your screen. You can hear everything we do. You can ask questions. I've been to a number of the CDE programs where you can't ask questions. And that's frustrating to me because they always say fax in your question. Well, I fax in a question, and near the end of the thing, they answer my question, but they say, well, yes, Bruce, the answer to that is okay. Well, what was the question in the first place? No one else knows what the question was. So, you know, it's kind of an empty thing. In our case, though, you can talk with us. Usually, our enrollment is small enough that it's not a problem at all just to interfere. You know, say, Bruce, I have a question, and we can bring you on. But on a few occasions, we've had as many as about 45 people on. And in a case like that, we usually have to have people raise their hand, and then we call on them. But everybody can hear the question, everybody can hear the answer, and so it's almost like being in this room right here. So let me invite you all to practice that here today. If you have a question, or if you have an answer, or if you have a comment, I have some information up here that's out of date, or that you know it's been changed or something like that. By all means, please chime in and help us make sure that you are getting your questions answered, and we don't leave here with a lot of misimpressions. Well, I'm going to change right now to the handout that you all have. This is what you should have, I think. It is the front page of it, and I'm going to page down a little bit until we get to that second page, because this is going to be essentially our outline, and we're going to see this on the early slides here. But what's happening again is that we have the proposed changes for OMB A133, well, no, for a bunch of stuff, which includes OMB A133 and OMB A87. Now, you'll know that you very often refer to A87 when you're doing your cost analysis. You know, it says we followed A87 and we've not spent money in a way that was not permitted by A87. Do you all know you do that? Well, your auditors test you for that. And so what you now need to know is, yes, we do that. And so we have to be able to confirm that we're following that. How many of you have ever looked at A87? A few of you? Yeah. If you were not an auditor, did you ever look at A87? How many of you really give a damn what's in A87? Well, yeah, we have this big document that has a whole bunch of things, minor details about what is allowed and what's not allowed for expenditures, and we have to say that we've followed A87. Well, there's a similar document now that has been out for hospitals, one for colleges and universities, and so A87 is for state and local governmental units, like a school district, like a county, like a city. But the A110, I think, is the one for universities. No, yes, and A50 is for hospitals, and so they have to say they followed the cost guidelines of these other programs. And now, finally, OMB said, well, you know, this set of cost guidelines is virtually identical to this set of cost guidelines. So it doesn't make sense for us to have two sets and tell you have to use A110 and you have to use A87 and stuff. They said, let's bring them all together. And so that's what's going on in this proposed stuff. We're actually taking a whole bunch of things and bringing them together. Now, what we're going to talk about here is A133, too. That's the audit guidelines for state and local governments, which includes schools and cities and counties. So A133 deals with the audit provisions in those, and they brought all that in, but they brought it in addition to the stuff from A110 and A89 and A50 and stuff. So they're making this one big document. Now, I have the table of contents in your handout for that entire document. It's a big table of contents. We're going to look at it. Obviously, we're not going to read every single line, but there are certain sections there I want us to focus on. When you have your handout, how many of you have one that has color on it? Okay. Does everybody have color? Okay. Do you have yellow pages when you get back to page 19? Do you see a lot of yellow marks and stuff? Okay, good. Then that's, again, Elizabeth did a good job. I sent her one handout, And then I looked at a couple things and I thought I can make this better. And I called her back and I said, have you sent that to your printer yet? And she said, not yet. So I said, she said, you have time to make the correction if you want to. Well, I didn't just make a correction, I scrapped the whole thing and started with this new one here. And it's mostly because I want to be able to use the color there to emphasize particular issues. And so that's what you're going to be seeing with it. All right, so we're changing now. As you can see also, there are some objectives that we have. And since you all have this, it doesn't matter that you can't read it up on the screen, right? Because you can read it there. So those learning objectives, the first one, I feel like we probably ought to present just a little bit of history on the Single Audit Act and how it came to be and why it needs to be corrected and stuff like that. And then I want us to talk about the new thresholds. You all remember that in order to qualify for a single audit, you have to have expended at least $500,000 in federal funds in the last year. Now that's federal funds either in cash or commodities, you know, any kind of in-kind type of stuff. You add those together and you get $500,000, and you have to have a Single Audit Act audit. How many of you had to have a Single Audit Act audit this year? Okay. How many of you had to have one when we had ARRA but didn't have to have one after that? You know, ARRA dumped a ton of money on us that took a lot of people that were at this threshold and popped them up here so that they ended up having to have a Single Audit Act audit, and they hadn't had one before. Boy, that, you know, those little towns out in West Texas, they were really baffled by that stuff. What is this single audit stuff? You know, because a lot of them had never had it. And in fact, there were a few CPAs that had not had to deal with clients that were having to have a Single Audit Act audit. Now that didn't happen in this area because you have lots of money and so forth. So then the next thing there, I want to explain how we select a major program. Now, how many of y'all get involved in the selection of a major program? How many of you know the difference between a major program and a major fund? How many of you care whether it's a major program? Yeah, because you see, it's a major program. That's a selection that comes as a result of an auditor's analysis. A major fund is a selection that comes because a particular set of funds or a fund at your district reaches a certain size, or if you all want to, you can say this one's important enough to us, we want to make it major. So they didn't give a title to that last choice there that I call the first one the quantitative test, and since they didn't have a title for that, the second one, I thought, well, it's a who cares test. If anybody cares, then they can designate it as a major fund if they want to do that. That it's not something that I ever recommend because it kicks this non-major fund up into a new audit category, which is probably going to have an impact on your audit expense. But you don't have anything to do with selecting something as a major program. The program is in your federally funded things. That's what we use for a major program. So we're going to go through this and look at how we select a major program. And folks, it's almost identical to the ways we've been doing it in the past. There are a couple things that have changed, and the first thing we've raised some of the thresholds to get into it, and we've lowered a couple of them too. And then the other thing that's been a slight change there after raising the thresholds and lowering some, there were some other issues that twisted the results a little bit. For example, if you're a college or a university and you have some very large student loan activities, and those are federally funded, or they are supported by federal funds, then that may cause what is typically a very small amount of money for a college to be popped up into a big one because of the guarantee on the loans, which would make that a major program, and it would overshadow all the other major programs in such a way that you might have something that has not been a major program in the past. I mean, it had been a major program in the past, and it was no longer just because of that freaky condition. So they've done some things to mitigate some unusual issues like that and make them easier for us to administer. All right, so we'll be talking about that on major programs. We'll also explain how to find compliance requirements for major programs, and that's going to be again in that gigantic document where we've taken everything and piled it into one document. There's a section right there that's still A133. And you can see it's not changed very much. So that's where we'll be looking for that. And then tell what the auditee's responsibilities are. This is the theme that I think is especially key for you all. This is what you have to do. And there's a great deal of emphasis now at several different levels that you all do what you're supposed to do. The three levels that are especially critical the American Institute of CPAs has some issues out that basically say the independent auditor's independence is impaired if you can't do certain things, if you don't know what has to be done. So in order for you to have an auditor audit you and be able to prepare your financial statements, you have to be able to show that you are competent to analyze what those are and to understand what's been published in your name. And then we'll go into that a little bit more too. The other thing is the General Accounting Office, or the Government Accounting Office, GAO, in their yellow book now, they have a set of guidelines that are virtually identical to the guidelines of the AICPA. So they're doing that too. Now, if y'all have a single audit, then that means you're under OMB A133, but OMB A133 says if you have a single act audit, you must also have a yellow book audit. And so since that's the case, all of the guidelines that apply down here under the yellow book, which are identical basically to the AICPA guidelines, all of those will click up into a single audit act audit. So you have to have those kinds of things in order for your auditor to be independent. And I have something that is published by the AICPA that is in your handout. We'll look at it. It's the back several pages in there. Those pages relate to what you need to do to prepare the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. Now, y'all know what that is. We call it the CFA. And we call it other things too when we're really mad at it. But the thing is, we have the CFA there, and you all have guidelines on how to prepare that. I also have a CFA that we use in our software, which we've developed to be congruent with the AICPA guidelines in their audit guide, which was developed in cooperation with OMB and GAO. So we're going to look at that one quite a few different ways. And I think when we get through it, I think what you'll be able to say is, well, gee, that's not so hard. You know, we ought to be able to understand that. And so that's going to be one of our objectives for that particular part. And then you'll see there is something, describe what OMB is doing to streamline circulars and guidance. This is a part that's, again, proposed. Right now you have the 14 guidelines that you have to audit, allowable activities, allowable costs, cash management. Are y'all familiar with those? How many of you are not familiar with those? Oh, okay, good. Well, let's quit. Okay, so you have those 14, and OMB said, there are a lot of these that really don't apply to some of these other programs. So why do we ask people to indicate, I didn't audit this because it doesn't apply? So now instead of going through that kind of exercise, they're going to say, with Title I, we want you to do this. And with Title IV, we want you to do this. And they're going to be more specific about the ones they want you to do. And they're trying to cut that down, so it's not going to be any more than about 4 or 5 per program. Right now you have 14. So we cut out all these that we don't need to talk about. Now one of them I found very fun was they're going to say, we want you to do cash management. How do y'all do cash management with schools in Texas? Follow TA's guidelines, right? Because can you spend money before you draw down? Do they send you money in advance? Sometimes they do, they're not supposed to, right? Sometimes someone goofs and they send you money in advance. Well, see, if you're following TA's guidelines, you're going to be following the federal guidelines. So I like that one because I just say, we audited for TA compliance and I'm through with that one. I don't have to do any more testing there because if you're compliant with TA's guidelines, you're fully compliant with the federal guidelines. So now, what did we say? We had 4 or 5 of them? We've cut that down, we have 3 or 4. And so we can go through here and see a lot of things that are changing for us that will make it unnecessary for us to do a whole bunch of things. So that's what we're going to do. And you're probably saying, well, gee, you probably had some slides that said that. Yes, I do. And when we get to those, I'll say, remember we already talked about this. But I want to give you an overall picture of where we're going with this before we jumped into it. And I'd like for you to turn a couple more pages where it says list of supplements. It's about well, it's right after the biographical sketches here. Do you have blue URLs under each one of those? Okay. Now, if you go to those, then you will see almost all the handouts that we have up here. You notice I did put one on the first handout I don't know why I missed that one, but I just did. At any rate, that one's an easy one to pick up. And you'll see that all of it in your manual anyway, all the part that I wanted to be concerned about. It's a part that deals with history. And then you'll see there are some things here with AICPA and others. Now, let me give you a little background on the one for the AICPA. AICPA has a couple of divisions now that deal with different levels of professionalism. You can be a member of the American Institute of CPAs even if you're not a CPA. You can be a member, it's kind of a provisional type member. There's another organization called the Government Audit Quality Center. Are you all familiar with that? How many of you have ever visited there? Well, that's probably true because you can't be members. How many of y'all are CPAs? You can't be a member of that because you're not a part of a licensed practice unit. A unit that's licensed to practice auditing in one of the jurisdictions that are recognized by AICPA, which would be the 50 states and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and stuff like that. Every place where they give the CPA exam and you can become a CPA. If you're licensed to practice in one of those states, and you're licensed with a firm, it's a licensed practice unit. That can be a one-man firm. But you have to be one of those to be a member of the Government Audit Quality Center. Now, they do publish some other things, though, that they allow people to look at, non-members. But to be a member, they have some really good stuff in the member area that you can't get to. I can't get to them either. I'm not a member of a licensed practice unit in the state of Texas because all I do is audit LEA and these presentations. And so I wouldn't have, well, if I had to go through peer review and some things like that, it's not very practical for me to do that. So I've never become a member of a licensed practice unit. But all of you have an auditor, right? And so if you find something on their table of contents that you think might be helpful, tell your auditor I want to see that. Because your auditor can't audit you unless your auditor is a member of a licensed practice unit in Texas. So you can get around it. You can get them to help you pick this information up. But you can't get it on your own. But they do have some really good stuff. And as I said, there's one thing at the end of your manual that came from this Audit Quality Center. And we'll look at that. It's one that I could get, even though I'm not a member of the Government Audit Quality Center, I could get it and download it because they want it out for their own purpose. And I think you'll understand why that's true as soon as we get back to that part. Okay, so then the CFA and Audit LEA, that one comes directly from my software, Audit LEA. We follow TEA's guidelines, and no, not TEA, AICPA. We follow their guidelines to produce this particular document. And we've been doing this for 30 years, and it's out there in real good shape. And lots of the organizations that use our software get the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And so, you know, it's one I think that you can rely on. The other thing is, every time we know that it's changed, we fix it. If something has changed, we try to fix it. The next thing, crosswalk from proposed guidance to existing guidance. This is going to be a very useful thing for you. Again, I have the entire thing in your manual for this, and you'll see how here's something that we have to do now. Where did that come from? If you want to go look what we did last year, it gives you the reference where the information that we're having to do now came from, and you can go back and pick up for a comparison. For instance, if you say, what's the cutoff for having to have a single audit act audit? It's going to be $750,000, I think. But where was it last year? Well, it was $500,000. How did we know that? Well, they showed you how you can go in and find exactly where those cutoffs are. And then it also shows you the relationship of all those other documents, the A110 and A50 and so forth that we mentioned a while ago. Okay, then if you look there at the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, this is the one that I've put in there that comes from AICPA. It's directly from AICPA. And okay, I'm sorry, I skipped over one. Actually, I skipped over a couple of them. That major program determination, that's going to be one that we'll go through here. And what I want us to point out there are the things that are different there, because it's almost exactly what we've been doing. And now you'll see that it's basically going to be the very same thing. in the future, just some different thresholds. Okay? So, how many of y'all have ever picked a major program? You've decided what should be considered a major program?
Well, you'd have to be an auditor to do that, wouldn't you?
Well, no, you don't. In fact, I'll bet you if we sit right here, yeah, you have to be to designate it. You're exactly right. But I can tell you what your auditor is going to pick next year if you can tell me what you did last year.
Well, they
That's-
rotate.
I'm sorry.
They rotate.
Well, they might. They don't always. You know, and certainly in the new document, they're encouraged to do that. But typically they rotate them on the little ones that are insignificant. So, but how many of you know what was a major program last year? Okay. Does it have to be a major program this year? Probably not. Unless the auditor found some significant problems in it so that it doesn't meet the criteria of being a low-risk major program. See, if it's a low-risk major program last year, then we don't have to audit it this year. As long as a program, a major program, a large program, has been audited at least once in a 3-year period, then it doesn't have to be considered a major program anymore if it's low risk. Okay, so we're going to go through the process now of picking those out, and toward the end of our program, I hope you all will be able to say, okay, I know every step we have to go through. We do this and this and this. In fact, if you go back to your office this afternoon, you can probably pick out everything that's going to be a major program for your school district tomorrow. No, you won't be working tomorrow now, will you? It's bad not to be here on Valentine's Day. Don't be here on Saturday. All right, then there's another document that I have on the screen here, and we're going to go into it fairly early, but it's the one that deals with the independence issue. And so you don't have it in your handout, but I don't think you'll need it because, again, we're following a lot of the guidelines that we've been following for the independence issue, and so we'll just be getting right through that one. And so now, well, the next page you have are references, and those are just places where I got my information. And I'm now ready for us to start in on the slides, this part. Okay, I guess this is obvious. I'm the presenter. Let me talk about the paperwork for just a minute. I mentioned that we have some CPE programs that we do on the internet. When you sign up for that program, you'll sign up on our website where we bill your credit card, or if you're a school district, we will bill you if you give us a purchase order. But you get signed up on the program, and then when we deliver the program, at the end of the program, you will send in an evaluation. And the evaluation is in an editable PDF form that the minute you fill it out and push the send button, the submit button, it comes to us and gets analyzed in our system. But you remember what Jesus said a while ago? If you don't fill out these evaluations, they don't get to get credit for this. So what we do is we say, you don't get a certificate if you don't fill one out. Okay? We're going to turn that monkey back on you. You give us the evaluation, and then we immediately turn around and send you a certificate of attendance. So within about 30 minutes of the time that you're through with it, you have this certificate by email. And no one has to touch any paper at all. You click your bubbles and send it to us. And then we're in conformity with that paperwork standard that Jesus was talking about. Now, that's also a standard. We are members of the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy in their CPE registry. And if we don't do that and they find that we haven't done it, then we could lose our membership in that particular thing. So that's a very important thing to us. But the paperwork's easy for you to do anyway, and we'd like for you to help us by just keeping that going. So, all right, then we go to the next one, the brief history. And this is the outline we just gave you a minute ago, so I don't need to go back over it. We'll start out with a brief history and go through all those other things down to the practice aids worksheet. And so now I'm ready for us to start with a brief history. Okay. And I'm going to jump clear back to Lyndon Johnson and to Richard Nixon and talk about how a lot of what we do now was created by that. You all know that Lyndon Johnson was the advocate of the Great Society. And a part of the Great Society was to help people that were disadvantaged have advantages economically from a variety of sources, mostly the federal government. He did this, Lyndon Johnson was a school teacher. Did y'all know that? when he graduated from it was called the Texas Normal College, which is the one in in San Marcos. Texas Normal College was Texas State, Southwest Texas State University, until just recently, and they changed their name now, it's Texas State University. But during that period of time, Lyndon Johnson went to school there while it was still Texas Normal College. When he graduated, he became a teacher, and one of the things that bothered him was that a lot of the students that would come didn't have a slate or a pencil or paper or food. And so he said at one of the meetings there, and they have this quoted, they said, if I'm ever in a position where I can help these people, I'm going to do it. And so when he got to be president, he said, I once said this, and he said, I'm now in a position to do that now, and I'm going to help them. And that was the Great Society. And they started that. And the principal part of the Great Society was the Title I. That was the very first, well, it was one of the very first things that they had in the Great Society. And so we start clear back there with the history. And then we go to Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon says the federal government gets quite a bit of money, and states and cities aren't getting quite as much. And so what we ought to do is share revenue. Do any of y'all remember revenue sharing days when the federal government kicked back some money? Well, a few of us do remember those, but they said we're going to kick back some money. And about that time, somebody in Congress said, you know, if we're going to give these people all this money, we ought to be sure that they're going to spend it the way we were intending them to spend it. That's what Mr. Ashton was talking about a while ago, right? You're the taxpayer. You ought to know what your government's spending the money on. And so they're the federal government. They're giving you all the money. They said, we want to know that you're spending it on what you're supposed to. That's where a lot of the compliance guidelines come from that we're involved with now. And so at that stage, they started developing some audit authorities. And initially, they were like the Inspector General and the Army Audit Agency and a bunch of things like that. So they had just dozens, well, probably even more than dozens. I'm going to say probably hundreds of audit agencies that would go around audit. All right, you're a school district. Do you have ROTC, any of you? Do you have to get audited by that? Maybe, maybe not. It's probably not a major program, right? Okay. Do you have food service? Well, yeah, everybody has food service. You have Title I, everybody has that, right? So you go down the list of a whole bunch of these things. So now Title I sends their person in to audit you. Food service sends their person in. The Army sends their person in. And you're being audited all the time. And so the federal government said, the auditee said, this is stupid. I can't get any work done because I'm always getting ready for another audit. And because that was true, Congress developed a bill and they passed it in 1984. It was called the Single Audit Act. And that said, if one person does the audit and they do a thorough and comprehensive enough audit, then no one else has to audit that. They can rely on the determination of the audit. Well, if that's the case, then we're going to have to develop standards that will meet the Army, food service, Title I, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where your compliance supplement comes from, because they had to develop some standardized stuff there. And so, well, like we say, too many auditors, not enough coordination. That was a part of our problem. So let's go on to the next one here. The Single Audit Act in 1984. And then some people looked at that and they said, you know, there's some things here that, this was the first draft, we did a good job, but we need to fix some things. And so they came back with the Single Audit Act in 1996 and made some amendments to it. And I don't remember now the details of those amendments, but they fixed some mostly administrative issues at that stage. And then some other people in 2003 said, you know, we are auditing things where the level of expenditure is so low it can't be important to anybody. And so they said, let's change some thresholds here, and they put in some thresholds. So we had our first major changes in thresholds at that time. That's when we got to 500,000, where we are right now, and some of those other things. And then in 2007, the AICPA had just issued their guideline that defined a material weakness. And what's the other one? Material weakness. What's not quite as bad as material weakness? Significant deficiency? Yeah, okay. What was significant deficiency called before that? Reportable condition? And so, now, I don't know what the effect of that change was, because I can't really see that much difference in it. But they said we can't call it a reportable condition anymore because no one knows what that is. So let's call it a significant deficiency. And I'm saying, does anyone know what that is? You know? So we've moved around here on some of our terminology, and that's what happened in 2007. All right, we've been going on, I guess it started in about 2000. Some people said there are other changes we need to make too. And so in 2000, they said, let's change what we're doing so that we are more efficient. We don't have all these different audit guidelines that are essentially the same, same audit guidelines. And so let's go adjust what we're doing here. And they were working on this in 2000. And just now, we've gotten to the point where they've said we're ready to issue some new changes. And that's what we're looking at today, the new ones that came from that. Now, you say, was that really a brief history? Well, yeah, but it gives the groundwork for where we're going from here. And I think what you'll see is we didn't change a lot of things. We've rearranged some things. We've made some things a little bit less technical. I mean, not technical, but immaterial. And so we've raised some stuff. But we're also, what I think I want to do in here is make sure that I point out, here's what you've been doing all along, and you don't have to change. You know, so let's don't make this a big problem. And do you remember GASB 54? People went crazy over GASB 54. Well, what did we do? We just changed a couple things. Mostly changed the names on some things, didn't we? So we had non-spendable items, and then we had some of the other ones, and people, it seemed like it was a very difficult thing. Well, this is a relatively easy thing. Most of what's going to happen now is your auditors are going to have new planning tools that they'll come out. So you'll see a new questionnaire and things like that, but they're designed to pick up some information here. And again, for you all, most of what you'll see is the fact that you all have to have the competence in this area. And so we're going to be working on how we document that. Okay, so you can read this. These are the proposed changes. And notice I have A122. I've been leaving that out. A110, A102. Do you all do the data audit feed or the data feed on it? Yeah. You have to do that, don't you? Your auditor has to be a participant in that process too. Well, they're changing some of the things that are going on with that as well. So, but I think I can say, in general, for all of this stuff, we're taking all of these dozens of eggs that were in different baskets and bringing them in and making a real good omelet, where it's easier for us to follow what's going on than it has been in the past. And part of what I want to do in here is show you, for you all, this is the part we're looking at. Out of all of these things, there's just going to be a fairly narrow part there that we need to look at. So you don't need to get worried about it. And I think we're going to be able to meet the guidelines for this. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Other rules, covered audit entities. All right, we're going to, we will cover not-for-profits. That means charter schools. Well, they've been covered for quite a while anyway, but they have some discussion about how that's going to work. They have some information on those cost allocations, and the brief history now is how we're bringing all of that. And then the compliance supplement, bringing that together. Incidentally, the compliance supplement is, for most of what we do in schools, is the responsibility of the Department of Education. They write the guidelines that they want to have audited there. And then they give that information that they have written to OMB, and OMB synthesizes that into the compliance supplement. So it comes from the Department of Education through the Office of Management and Budget, and then for most of y'all, most of your federal grants come through TEA, don't they? And so they're a pass-through entity, and we'll have some information on that. And so that compliance supplement, what we'll be looking at in here will be the current compliance supplement, the one that was issued. It's dated March 2013. It was actually first available in July 2013. It's been coming out late, and OMB has said we're going to quit doing that. We're going to start having them on time. I think, man, that's a start in itself right there. But also, one of the reasons they're saying that that's a possibility is because they're streamlining it so that it's not going to take so long to get it fixed up for us. Okay, so now let's go to the uniform grant guidance here. The final guidance has been issued. This is what is currently in the Federal Register, and it was issued, let's see, I don't have a date on there, but it was in 2012, this uniform grant guidance. And so if you go to the Federal Register, it talks about bringing these together, and then they have the final guidance has been brought out in that one, but it doesn't say you have to implement it yet. So it says, upon implementation, here's what you're going to do. And now this is what I want you all to help me find. If you all will find that we've been directed to implement it, and you find that, please let me know. Because I've searched and I can't find it, and y'all may have somebody else, your auditor may have said, well, yeah, I don't know why I didn't look here, and I don't know why I didn't either. If they could find it, I'll be able to. But if you look at that and you say, well, we found it, and you let me know, then I would really appreciate that. That would be very important to me. Okay, so now here's a question. When must the final guidance be implemented? What's the answer? I don't know. At this stage, I don't know. But I think it's coming fairly soon, and as I said earlier, I think it's going to come in blocks. There'll be certain segments of it that we will implement right away. All right, then this is the Government Audit Quality Center. I've mentioned that one to you before. Again, we're going to have some communication from them. I went to their audit page thinking that I could find an announcement that we have to implement the new guidelines for A133, and I could not find that anyplace. Again, they referred us back to the Federal Register. There's a date on that. It's the Federal Register is on the in 2012, and so most of the work that I could find from their section was as of 2012, but it has not yet been put into the final acceptance. It has now been finalized by OMB and the other parties that are involved in that, but we do not have implementation guidelines on it yet. Okay, so the stuff is there. The stuff is fine, but not the implementation. So now, what I want us to do is change gears just for a minute and talk about why you all get into this. Okay, so far we've talked about what happens with the audit and who's going to be responsible for audits and stuff like that. But I want to bring in why you all are big players in this right now. So I want us to start with the AICPA provision. This is in their ethics section in the professional standards in section 100, interpretation 101. It has the usual audit stuff, okay? The usual independent stuff. So for instance, if my wife serves on the board of trustees of your school district and I want to audit your school district, can I audit them? No. Now, I used to have something that I thought was kind of an interesting thing, because they didn't say if my girlfriend was on the board and my wife didn't know it, could I audit them? But now they have a deal where they say, for unusual situations, you can't do it. So, all right, I don't know if that's an unusual situation or not. Y'all know any board members that have girlfriends or boyfriends? Okay. So, do y'all have those conflict of interest questionnaires? Do you issue those to vendors that are?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, well, see, when you read that, I'm looking for the nasty stuff, like, can I audit my girlfriend? And no, they don't give those things. In fact, it's kind of a sterile document, isn't it? It really is. So I called the ethics, the Texas ethics group, I forgot their name now, Ethics Commission, isn't it? And I called them, I said, give me some more details here. And they said, hey, listen, we just wrote what the legislature said and we don't enforce it. We don't have any idea what you're supposed to do. I said, all right, I'll do what I want then. And that part is still kind of out there. Okay, GAO, again in the 2011 revision. Now this was very interesting. In 2010, GAO came out with a document that they said is the last revision we're going to have in Yellow Book for quite a period of time. And this was the exposure draft for that. Well, it was out for just a few months and they called it back and killed it and started over and came out with 2011, which was significantly different. But in the area of independence, it wasn't different. It wasn't different at all. It was basically the very same thing we've been going with. Now, you have to look through it pretty detailed. Because they'll say in one paragraph you can't do this, and then in the next paragraph they say you can. And you have to look for the very subtle items that make that difference for you. And so, how many of your auditors prepare your financial statements for you? Nobody in this group. Okay, they do in other places, the auditors. How many of you, when your auditors prepare the financial statements for your clients? That has happened. So anyway, we have the GAO now came out with their version of this, which was virtually identical to the one AICPA had. And that's what we're going to be looking at in some supplements in just a minute. That the supplement I'm going to take us to is one called the conceptual framework. And it's the very same conceptual framework that AICPA is now talking about in theirs. So they've had the conceptual framework for years, but now they're calling it that. The GAO called it that. So if you all will not worry about this, because you can't get to this page. Okay, and I'm going to blow this one up because you don't have this in your manual. But it will be on our website if you want to download this, and I'll tell you how to do that in just a minute. But I don't know, I don't know if you can read it back there toward the back. Anyway, let me see if I can make it. Can you read that? Okay. All right, so the first question is there a situation where there may be a threat to independence? And if the answer is no, then just proceed. So for instance, if I want to audit Austin ISD, I could do that because I don't have anything that's standing in the way by doing that. There's no threat to my independence if I do the audit. So we don't need to worry about it. On the other hand, if Elba is on the board of trustees, then there is a threat, isn't there? Okay. Now this is one of the threats that they have that is always excluded. Okay. Wives, husbands, business partners, children, etc. You can never audit one where one of those people is in an important role. Now, if Elba was a school teacher teaching math there, but not on the board of trustees, then I could. What if Elba is the assistant superintendent in charge of finance? Probably not, because see, it's likely there's going to be a conflict. So you see, there's some stuff that we need to be concerned about, some judgments here. So is the threat related to a non-audit service? Okay, now I've only been talking about no, I did talk about other things besides non-audit services. Like if no, I didn't do that. What I'm worried about, can I prepare the financial statements for my client? And if that is now considered a non-audit service. About 5 years ago, preparing the financial statements for a client was considered a part of the audit service, but it's not anymore. The GAO and AICPA have both changed that, so it's considered a non-audit service. So you see, it is a non-audit service, so we have to go over here, is non-audit service specifically prohibited? And if it is, then I can't do it. Now here's where we're going to have a kind of a confusion thing. If you look in both the Yellow Book and the AICPA material, it says I can't prepare the financial statements for a client. But then it goes on in another place and it says I can't take responsibility for the financial statements that I have prepared for my client. If I don't take responsibility, if you all take responsibility for the financial statements I prepared for you, I can still be independent. Okay? So now that's going to bring us into the other. Let's go down the other side though, where it says no. Assess threat for significance. That was over coming down with that no. Is the threat significant? And if the answer to that is no, it's not significant, then I can proceed. If the answer is yes, it is significant, then what I need to do is find out, well, is there a way to mitigate that? Okay, can we implement some safeguards that make it no longer a significant threat? And if the answer to that is yes, I can. If we can put safeguards in, then I can proceed. If the answer is no, I can't put safeguards in, I guess that's down here on this part down here. If the safeguards aren't going to be effective, then no, I can't do the audit. Okay, I'm not independent. Okay? Now, so the key thing though that I want us to get to is that part that I can do things for you if you take responsibility for them. All right, and here's the new part. You have to take responsibility for them in writing, okay? And you have to demonstrate that you're not just saying, yeah, I'll take responsibility for that. I have to know from analyzing your skills that you're capable of understanding and taking responsibility for it. Okay? That's the key thing. It's not altogether new, but it's kind of new. The emphasis on that is what's new. A very, very strong emphasis now with this last part. And so that's why we're going to have that last handout in your material where AICPA helps you go through preparing the CFA. Because if you're going to take responsibility for the CFA, you better know how it's done. Okay? Do you have to do it? No, you don't. If you have one on LEA, we'll do it for you. Or your auditor may do it for you. You see, these things can be done for you by somebody else, but if you know, yeah, that's what should be there. Like a while ago when you all were giving Mr. Ashton information, yeah, that's pretty accurate stuff, and I think you said yours was accurate, yours was not, and so, or there was somebody here whose material was not real accurate, so you had the ability to say, I know what should be there, and it's not there, and so I'm not going to take responsibility for it until you fix it. Okay, the rest of us, we looked at it and said, well, that's good enough for me. And so we can take responsibility for it. That's where you all come in, and that's the main focus now of what we're trying to do here, is make sure you understand that responsibility and how we get you to the level where you can take the responsibility for it. I was testing it a minute ago, and it didn't seem to be on, so. If I'm just a little bit froggy, we've had cedar fever in Boston, and I get that worse than I'm supposed to. And so what I might do is pause for a minute and go back and get some water. I've been thinking they put some gin back there, and that would help a lot. Okay. Did you understand the flow chart here? Identifying some things. The main thing that we need to concentrate on then, for our purposes of independence here, most of the time deals with this section right in here. We've identified a threat, haven't we? If you want me to prepare the financial statements for you, I can't do it unless there's evidence I'm independent. And so the safeguard there is for you all to have the ability to take responsibility for what you've asked me to do for you. Now, this was really a wonderful compromise, I think, on the part of both GAO and AICPA, because at one time, the GAO and the AICPA said the independent auditor cannot prepare the financial statements for any of their clients, period. There was no mitigation in there, and that was the point they were arguing to enforce. But fortunately, it never did get going. Have you ever heard of a person named Marcia, what's her name, from GAO? Oh, well, anyway, Marcia was her first name, I've forgotten now. But I called Marcia and I said, Marcia, you know, I work with a lot of CPAs and small school districts in Texas. And if the auditor can't prepare their financial statements for them, they're in a world of hurt. And she said, I know that, Bruce, but we have to come up with something. And so, fortunately, they did come up with this compromise, which I think is a very reasonable one. Okay, so, well, let me ask this. Why shouldn't you be competent? Right? Can you imagine the University of Texas wanting to hire me to be the new head coach for football? That would be the biggest joke ever, wouldn't it? So no, can you imagine my even wanting to apply for it? That'd be a bigger joke. But, so let's go now. I'm going to leave this part and go back to the slide because our very next slide deals kind of with this issue. The auditee has to agree to certain conditions, which basically is that you will put somebody in charge of the audit that has the capability of understanding what's been done and taking responsibility for it. Now, there's another thing that GAO and AICPA did that was really, really good, and that was they said the person that represents the auditee does not have to be able to prepare or re-prepare the financial statements. They just have to understand them well enough to take responsibility for them. So, but that was a big break, especially again for, not for you all, because you all have people that can probably deal with the responsibility thing, but people that aren't here, where the bookkeeper, the food service manager, and the bus driver is all the same person. Right? They just don't have the ability to break this out. And so you go, I used to audit a person, her name was Olga, and she was that, well, also she was a girls volleyball coach. So in addition to all those other things, I want Olga to prepare the financial statements. That wasn't at all reasonable, was it? And if she did, I'd have to undo them all and re-prepare them. So, you know, it wasn't a situation we could deal with at all. But at that time, we didn't have that emphasis on financial statement preparation. It was kind of foregone thought that the independent auditor would prepare the financial statements. In fact, a lot of people refer to as the auditor's financial statements, right? That used to be a reference that I've heard a lot. So, but now we're changing this. So how do we help out? Well, I'm going to cut away for a minute and give you a commercial. EDMIS has a course that we call the District's Responsibility for Preparing the Financial Statements. And when we have that course, what we do is take people through elements of the financial statements and explain to them what's going on there. And we have a checklist at the end of the program where we'll say, now, here you need to make sure that you've made all the adjusting entries. Do you know what an adjusting entry is? Well, yeah, I think I do, you know. And so we go through and talk with them about adjusting entries. And on this checklist, now they know why it should be there. And so they can check off, yes, they've been done. They say, Bruce, can I see your work papers? And I say, yes, here they are. You did it, yeah, apparently you've done the work, the adjusting entries correctly. I'll take responsibility for them. They know enough. Now, what adjusting entry can you think of that's the most important one that needs to be made? Payroll? Yeah, especially for federal programs. Very often the timing for a federal program is not the same as the fiscal year for the school district. And so sometimes you have to put some payroll in this period and other times in this period. So, you know, that's one, but that's easy to explain, isn't it? And so we have that explanation, and they say, oh, I understand that. So now they're going to be able to look at things and put check mark there. Yes, they understand, and they'll take responsibility for it. So we go through this. We even go to the government-wide adjusting entries to make the government-wide financial statements. That's how far we go. And we have a checklist again for them to go through and check off. Did you have bonds? Yes, we did. How did you record the interest on the bonds? At the fund level, at the government-wide level. So, you know, we can take them through that, and they understand well enough to click off. And so we get them to make sure that as they do this, they make a copy. Well, right now they have a copy. They download it in the way we're doing it. So they have a copy to show to their independent auditor, and the auditor can say, well, I think they're probably sufficiently confident that we are still independent, or they're an independent way. You know, and so we've got to start all over. I got a call just recently from a guy who said, I have never audited accounting myself, but there is a CPA firm here in town that audits accountings almost exclusively. And they have accounting where the people cannot make these decisions, and so they want me to go in and review their work papers and decide whether or not the county should take responsibility for it. And I'm going to be, in essence, a part of management for this particular part. Does that seem to be okay in the new guidelines? What do you think? Sure, no problem at all. But now that CPA that doesn't work with the auditor is actually kind of a member of management, right? Okay, just like some of y'all are CPAs and you work for the school district, you're a member of management. But you couldn't do this work for the auditor. You couldn't prepare the financial statements and express an opinion on it. So we have that covered. Now there's another one too that is coming up. We're not going to spend too much time on this today, but I'm quite concerned about the new emphasis on internal controls. There's a huge new emphasis on internal controls, and most of them I'm not worried about. You know, internal controls are not all that complex, except for one thing, and that's where we get into federal programs. How do you express an opinion on the internal controls that your federal program director has over determining how much money should be allocated to each one of the campuses that receives Title I support? How often do they do that? Once a year? Don't they? At budget time, they make that allocation. And so it's not the kind of thing like determining which students should be in Title I. And we can do stat sampling on that. We have a set of guidelines we have to follow to make sure that we can do those things. So that's an internal control, a typical kind of internal control thing where we look at documents when it only occurs once a year. Do we want to try to design some kind of stat sample for that? Well, that'd be a stupid thing, wouldn't it? Because a sample of one, that statisticians would laugh at us for doing that. So I'm not sure how you do that. Well, so what I'm going to do, y'all know Paul Mackey by chance? Any of y'all, his name Paul Mackey ring a bell to you? Well, he was with TEA for a long time working in Title I, and eventually was the director of that Student Services Division. But then he went to work for TECS, which was Texas Educational Consultative Services, and he did all kinds of consulting for them, helped write grants and stuff like that. Paul he's an accountant, he's an expert on Title I, and so I would go to Paul and say, how would we do this? And he said, Bruce, I don't know anything you do other than write a memo. That I saw the way they did it, they seem to be doing it right, they did it right last year, apparently they have controls. Or they were supposed to have done this and they missed it, so apparently they don't have controls. Okay? So I don't know how we write that down. And I've kind of wrestled with that. I've looked at different ways to prepare some kind of document there. And every year they have a new section for internal controls over compliance. And part of it comes from OMB and part from AICPA. But part of it, it always tends to me to appear to be very, very general and very, very non-specific. And on internal controls, I like to really grab hold and know I have control. And I'm not sure I do that if we're just thinking a person does this periodically. And just like you all, when you prepare the annual financial report for your school district, how often do you do that? Once a year? Do you forget what you did last year? It takes a lot of time, doesn't it? And so you say, wow, I've got to go back and figure out what I'm trying to do here. It's not an easy thing for us to do. And so we also have a course, we call it Internal Controls for Schools. And we're going to have those up on our website in, probably in about a week, where we have announced some schedules for when those courses are going to be offered. They are offered, well, we will offer those in-house or online, but most of the time they're online because, number one, we can have much smaller classes. We can make it economically feasible for us to have as few as 7 or 8 people in the class. And so we don't have to wait till we have 50 people that come in and we can offer them. Plus, when we're doing that, we have a chance where we can talk to people and they can ask questions and stuff like that. So that one's going to be one. And again, there will be some documentation that you've done it. You are competent. You know you can accept responsibility for it because you've been trained in that, and your auditors will be helped with that type of thing. So let me go to the next one here. CFA, Scheduled Expenditures and Federal Awards. And, we get to where we call things by their acronyms, and I forget that not everybody knows what the acronyms are. For instance, a while ago, Mr. Ashton was referring to AP checkbook. And I said, is that accounts payable checkbook? And somebody said, yeah, that's probably what it is. And I'd never heard it called it. I just had a checkbook. And I didn't remember that we actually write checks for the accounts payable. But then I thought, well, that's what we're talking about with our cash pool. We have cash pool for payroll, and we have one for accounts payable. So that must be what he's talking about on an AP checkbook. Do you all have separate checks altogether, completely different for accounts payable than you do for everything else? Okay, I would imagine that we would ordinarily do. Do you do that for payroll? Some of them you do, yeah. But is that a bad internal control? No, not at all. It might be a very good one. right? But it's just, I hadn't heard that acronym, so now you'll know CFA stands for Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards and other financial statements. Now, I put in CFA because that's the one that OMB talks about most. They don't say much, they just simply say you should do the entire report. And essentially, when they say the entire report, they're talking about your CAFR or your AFR. And the CFA for us happens to be a part of that. It didn't used to be a part of that. It was a separate document typically, but now almost everybody does the CFA along with their annual financial report. So we're talking about all of it, but mostly we're going to be talking about the CFA. And so there are different ways this is put together. OMB, they make a presentation, but it's all verbal. You ought to have the following items in it. And then AICPA in their audit guide, they have an example. They have the verbal part, and then they have an example showing stuff. And I'm going to use mostly in what we're doing here, Audit LEA, the example that we produced from Audit LEA, and then we're going to go back there and look at everything that's in there and ask you what else should be in there. Okay? So let me go to our next slide here. Because the preparation of this is an auditee responsibility, auditees share an important role in the determination of this. Okay? Remember a little earlier we asked the question, could you tell me what's a major program for next year right now? Yeah, you can tell me what's probably going to be. The auditor picks it out, but you can say the probability this one's going to be a major program is very high. For instance, if Title I was not audited in the last 2 years, what was that?
Become alive.
Yeah, cedar fever is back. Okay. It's in the ceiling or something. Anyway, I bumped this at the time, so that may have had something to do with it. On the CFA, there are certain things that should be in there, and every one of the items that are in there comes right directly from your accounting information. If you audited, if Title I was audited as a major program, or has not been audited as a major program in the last 2 years, it has to be a major program. It cannot be a low risk, unless it's a small. But y'all don't have any small Title I's, right? Anybody in here have a Title I program that's under $300,000? Okay. Anybody have one that's over $10 million? No. Yeah, we got Houston back there. Y'all have anything that's under $80 million? Yeah. Well, you know, we have these different sizes. Now, out in West Texas, again, there are a lot of people that have never seen a Title I program that was much more than $200,000 or $300,000 because they don't have that many kids. It's just that small. At any rate, that's me, isn't it, again?
He's working on it.
Should I take it off? If I do take it off, can you all hear me?
No.
Okay.
Wait for a while.
Okay.
Wait.
Okay.
Yeah, wait for a while.
All right, great, thank you. Well, I can hear you, why couldn't you hear me? How's it doing now?
Excellent.
Okay, good. All right, well, so let's see, let's go back and take a look. Well, no, let's go through some more slides before we go look at that supplement for the CFA. Here's the next slide. CFA is based almost entirely upon stuff that comes from your system. And in fact, with Audit LEA, we just download stuff out of your system. Oh yeah, maybe they won't bark out at us like that. Okay, all this stuff just comes right straight from your system, including your NOGA information, which will include your CFDA number, including the pass-through entity identification number, the title of the program, etc. All of that should come from the documents you already have. And the amounts should be collected during the grant in the accounting procedures. Now, we've been working with a school district that does their grants on a program basis, not on an annual basis. And so they end up, and I don't think this is right, but they end up with a bunch of stuff in the fiscal year 2014 that actually was spent in fiscal year 2012 and 13. because the program ends in 14, so they bring all that stuff forth. My understanding is that it should be fiscal year, shouldn't it? Shouldn't a CFA? So we're going to have 2013, but we're also going to have a project number, which will be the 2012, and another project number, which will be the 2014, unless our programs, our fiscal year is June 30th. See, that's one of the advantages of June 30th fiscal year. We don't get all those multiple programs in action at one time. And but all that stuff gets collected right out of your system. Right out of your system. You don't have to spend a lot of time accumulating and processing additional data if you're doing your accounting system right. Okay, this should cover the fiscal year, not the project duration. Notes should describe items that are not clear in the schedule itself. So that I've never seen a deal yet where we had a program where we had to have notes that described what it was. Because everything I've ever dealt with had a CFDA number and it had a separate description. But that's because in school districts, that's almost always the case. Occasionally, with a city or a county, you'll have something that was funded and they didn't have a really good CFDA number, and so you have to describe what was going on there. But most of the time, that just comes from the system. The district can predict what will be major and what won't be major, all right? Now, let's defer that for right now, because I want us to go to the place where we calculate what's major and non-major, and we'll see how that calculation is done. And then if we need to, we can come back to the CFA and actually do the calculation. So for right now, though, let's go to the CFA here, and in your manual. Let's see, I'm trying to remember what the page number is. Page 17 and 18. There it is. Now I want to shrink that a little bit too. Again, you all have this stuff right in front of you. So, all right, look what's on each one of those. Now I put it in yellow too, so you can see what's there. But what you don't have on yours are the little bullets here, the little bubbles, which tells me, reminds me what that should be. That's the granting agency. You have to have that identified in it. You have to have the CFDA number. You have to have the pass-through number. So for most of us, this is going to be TEA. You have to have the TEA identifier. Where do you get those 4 items?
No.
No. Yeah, just pull it right out. Is that hard? Do you all ever see a NOVA? Does your federal program director ever see a NOVA?
Yeah.
Do any of y'all have situations where you don't talk to your federal program director? Carol Edwards was a person that worked at TEA for a while, and then she and I did some seminars together, and she was an expert in special ed. And so she would always tell people, be sure you talk to your business manager and your special ed director. Be sure they communicate very well. And so one day, a guy came in late to the program, and he was one of those guys that does his leg like this all the time, you know, the tables. He was really kind of high-strung. So he was back there and he sat down, and so Carol said, have you hugged your business manager today? And he said, hell no. She said, well, I don't think we have much communication here. You know, but it's not that we don't like each other, it's just that we're too busy, and we have totally different directions. And so what we need to do probably is sit down and talk with one another to do some of this planning. Now that's not just for special ed, but Title I is for all of our programs, which would include now, wouldn't it, state programs like Comp Ed,
Yeah.
stuff. We've got to do those. All right, so we go down here, and now what is this one? You see that asterisk right there? What does that mean?
Footnote.
No, not that one. That means it's a major program. We've identified this as a major program. The independent auditor has named it a major program. So, do you all put that item in there? You do after the independent auditor identifies it as a major program, then, because you're doing the financial statement, so you put it in there. But you don't choose that. The auditor is the one that chooses that, going through this process that we're going to go through in just a little bit. Okay, and then the only thing that is on here that we don't have right now for next year's CFA is the amount you've spent. Do you already know your NOVA? I'm sorry, your CFTA number for Title I? You know your pass-through identifier? And you know everything that's on this item right here, on this document, except how much you've spent. And where do you get that? Well, you go to trial balance and say, tell me what I've spent. And here it is. Well, that was the miracle that Mr. Ashton was talking about a while ago, right? Where you just click a button and you get it. No, I think that was Jesus. But Jesus is going to have that there where he goes to his board and he can say, here's what we had, and he can produce that pretty quickly because he has the algorithm ready to go. We can do that right now too. So this should be an easy document for you to prepare. And this is the format, the exact same format that they had in the most recent audit guide from the AICPA. This format. There are other formats that some people use, but this is by far the most common one that I have seen. So we can go on down here. Now you said the notes. I don't have an example of the notes, but they're going to come down here at the end, and there's a discussion now from AICPA and OMB about what should be in the notes. And there will be more discussion about that. We do have some notes in our example financial statements that we have with our handout materials for our Title I program. I'm sorry, not our Title I, for our district's responsibility for preparing the annual financial report. But those are probably going to change. And in fact, what they ought to do, you ought to put in whatever note you think is necessary for full understanding of what's going on in this document. Okay? Well, then I'm through with that one. And I'm going to go back now to the slides. And I am ready for us to go on to this one. Do you all have questions about the CFA? Maybe I should pause. Do you have questions about anything so far? Okay. Have I bored you yet?
No.
Have you gotten something new?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, good, because now is when the new stuff really hits. So we're going to be talking about these proposed changes. But remember what I said earlier? Almost all of the proposed changes are just a I'm going to change in the organization of this document. There's very little change in the substance. So when you're picking a major program, you're going to do almost the same stuff you've been doing for years. It'll be virtually the same stuff. When you all say, well, we don't pick the major program. All right, when your independent auditor picks the major program. But now why would you want to know what's probably going to be a major program before your auditor picks it?
Have your ducks in a row.
There you go. I couldn't have said it better. Just get all lined up. You're ready for them, right? Don't you think Denver would have loved to have had Seattle's huddle before they got out on the field? Boy, what a massacre that was. Yeah. So, well, next year maybe. What's that?
I asked if you knew what sport you were talking about.
Downhill skiing, right?
Right.
She's one of those. My son is that way too. I have two sons that could care less about sports, and one son that if you didn't know everything there is to know about him, he's not happy. So, all right. Well, so anyway, what we know now is how to get ready for them, and that's a part of being competent, isn't it? If we know how to get ready for them. Did you ever go into an audit where everybody had everything lined up and they were ready to go? Those of you who've audited. Isn't that a whole lot easier than going into an audit where they don't have the foggiest idea of what's going on? Yeah. In fact, I used to be a professor. And so what do you think is the very easiest kind of exam to grade? The easiest, if all the students hand in their exams, what is the easiest exam to grade from all the students here? The what? Well, I mean, even whether it's true or false. It's one that's blank. If they didn't answer anything, that's easy, you know, that's a zero, and no one argues about that. They just find flunk. That's an easy one. You don't have to look for it. On one that they've gotten an A, though, that's almost as easy.
Have you ever had somebody turn the?
Oh, yeah, you do, every now and then. In fact,
How'd that work for them?
well, they dropped the course.
Oh.
When, you know, as a matter of fact, when I was at UT El Paso, we had a basketball player who was pretty good, but he had finished his eligibility. And so you could hardly get him to come to class, but he came for an exam and just turned in a blank paper. And so the athletic department sends you a question, how's old Jason doing there on the baseline? Well, Jason ain't doing no good at all. And so they said, well, he's no longer eligible. I told him that he had just walked out of the exam, wouldn't come to class anymore. They said, we'll just pull a scholarship. So I don't know whatever happened to old Jason, but he didn't pass my course. And that's not something I'm bragging about. It's just, what else can you do? You know, what else can you do if they do that? Now, in fact, is it doing that again? That's okay. When I was taking the CP exam, it was different then than it is now. You know, you go to a place where you're working on a computer. I used to go to a gym floor. I took the exam in Oklahoma City, and we were all on this gym floor, and they had the tables set down with the dividers, and we sat down to take the CPA exam. And the guy next to me opened it up, closed it up, and left. You know, he paid his fee, and I didn't know why he bothered to drive down there, because it took him longer to drive there than it did to turn in the paper.
You probably got a day off of work.
Well, that could be. The guy on another side of me, he worked for a little while, and he dropped down and do 25 push-ups, and he get back to work. Stuff in the can, he was next to me. I thought, my goodness, this is... So, what we're going to be doing now is looking at these proposed changes. And the proposed changes, again, are mostly in the order where they're coming. And since you're going to know what that order will be, and since you can study this, it's not going to take you very long to learn what you need to know, so that you'll be able to fulfill all of the OMB requirements. And so let's see. You'll notice my next slide just says go to page 19. So let's do that one first. Go to page 19. And what we're going to do on page 19 wait a minute. You have to get to the right document here first, right? Yeah. Okay, y'all have this one? Has yellow marks on it and some things like that? Okay. What this one does is give you a crosswalk from what we're going to be doing to where the document came from. Okay? This stuff over here is where we got the stuff that we're going to have over here. Now notice those first two are yellow. I tried to put yellow here with the items that are going to be mostly for a school district. Notice on the next one down here, this is A110. Well, I think A110, if I remember this correctly, A110 is for colleges and universities. So the item over here on exceptions came from some stuff with colleges and universities. What would an exception be? Well, you know, most colleges and universities get their grants when they apply for a research grant. So they're going to mix chemicals together and get a boom, and that's the nature of the grant. Or they get animals together to get new species. And so the objective here is to fund research, and so they don't know exactly what's going to be happening. And since that's the case, there will be some allowed costs, but we'll have some exceptions. And this cost is narrowed out except, etc. So they have some things like that. And so you see that's mostly in A110. And so what I've tried to do here is pick out the ones that are going to apply to a school district. If you look down here at this one, see it says combined and revised as 201. That's where they took all of those monsters. Remember we looked at that slide a while ago which had all the stuff that's been combined? And every bit of that. not only the audit guideline, like A133, but also the cost information on it, like A87. And then they did that for 110 and the stuff that goes with colleges, and for 50 and the stuff that goes with hospitals, et cetera. So they kind of combine them all. And in these places where it says combined revised, that means they took all of this stuff that was common to everything and stuck it into one. So this is going to apply to us as well as others. Now over here, this one says announcements of funding, and there are announcements of funding opportunities from time to time with Texas schools, and most of it comes from this in the guidance on 68 FR. But notice this was published in 203. That was published shortly after Christ died. Okay, I'm sorry about that. That was incredibly sacrilegious, and I didn't mean it to be. It's just we have a typo there, and you know it's got to be brought up. Would you guess that's 2013?
Yes.
I would too. Okay, so then we go down here and we look at 209 pre-award costs. That's new, and that's going to apply to all of us. So can I, if I do some things to get ready to do a grant, and I incur some costs, can I get those costs into the grant? In some cases, yes, and that's what these new guidelines are for. So you see a whole bunch of new items here, right? The control of this subchapter, et cetera. Now notice also here, this is the federal award notice right here. And up above that, we were talking about the pre-award requirements. And then just general requirements before that. So now we go down to the next one here. And subchapter D, inclusion of general terms and conditions in federal award notice. That was just kind of a continuation of some of the other stuff. But see, there's a lot of new stuff again. Excuse me. And then in section 500 here, the subchapter E, post-federal award requirements, and you'll see a bunch of A133 has been included there. That whole first line, right? And doesn't it say in its entirety? Okay, so we're going to pick up a bunch of stuff. So now, if you say, wow, subrecipient monitoring, does that apply to me? And what was happening before this happened? We have to go back to A133 and we can find out how it connects. If you need to do that, now I'm going to guess most of the time we won't need to do that. But if you do need to do that, this will be a very valuable document so you can go back and forth to see where you are, where you're supposed to be. And then we're going to go here to the cost principles. Now, remember in your compliance supplement, always item B is allowable cost and cost principles. Remember, we have item A, which is allowable activities, item B, allowable cost and cost principles, item C, cash management, item D, Davis-Bacon. Don't remember that? Okay, how many of you don't remember that or have not been exposed to that? Well, that's good. Okay, so anyway, that's what we're doing here is the stuff on these cost principles, and notice that A87 and A21 are in that policy guide. That's just an introduction, and then they get into some more detail here, some more specific stuff. So you have some more A87 down here that I didn't get in yellow. I should have, but I didn't. And then we have indirect, and what is F and A? Indirect and F and A.
Are you under E?
Let's see, it should be subtitle 3. It's on, this is on page 21. F and A, that's facilities and administration. That's what that is. So they have some provision now for allowance of facilities and administration costs there. And then we go on down here to, well, look here. Now we're into section 6, general provisions. Okay. Now look at the, what is it, the fourth one down, third one down, in that C3. What do you bet? Are alcoholic beverages allowed or unallowed? Well, there are some exceptions every now and then, right? Can you imagine having the alumni in the exclusive booth at the top of the football field without any alcoholic beverages?
On what facility?
Like the Sun Bowl? Yeah, the university. Yeah, okay, y'all are thinking, well, y'all don't have any very exclusive booths there, do you?
Oh, we do, but you could have a lot.
Oh, okay, all right, well, but see, now this is kind of for a general thing. Well, how do we do that? See, this is what can we charge to the program? So we get somebody to donate it. And then get charged to the program. Now, in schools, you can't do that, right? At UT, you can, I think. Yeah, I know at UT El Paso you could. They had a wine steward and a bartender there that would come around and serve people. You know, UT El Paso is where the Sun Bowl is, so you can do that. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad. Y'all are making a judgment here. That's bad. Well, if they're playing the way the Broncos did,
Depends on the
John,
brand.
what's that?
Depends on the brand.
That's right, that's right. John Elway really needed a drink, didn't he? Now, by the way, he is the new general manager for the Denver Broncos. Okay, so, you know, the point I'm trying to make is, you can't just look at something and say, yeah, always or no, never. You know, it's going to change here, so you need to look that up. And for the most part, I don't think y'all need to spend any time looking up alcoholic beverages, because you know that's not enough. Okay, so then we go on here. Well, I'm not going to go through all of these because you can see they're just page after page after page of these where they are saying what. In fact, these are the definitions, aren't they? No, that's whether or not you can serve those or use them. That's an allowable clause. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, so we've got all the way through our allowable clause. Allowable, now remember that the title is allowable and unallowable cost. So the alcohol is probably an unallowable. Okay, then we go down here. Now this is the one for, look at everything over the right-hand column. It's all A133 in it. Okay, so what they did was pick up A133 almost verbatim. They edited a little bit of it and dropped it right in here. And if you look at these requirements over here on the left-hand side, aren't they basically the same thing that we used to have in the... There's virtually no change here. There's nearly no change, so you don't need to worry about it. What has changed is good. They raised the threshold. They raised the threshold on number one, whether or not you have to have a Single Audit Act audit. How many of you have not spent at least $750,000 in federal financial assistance in the last year? No, okay, y'all are all single audit people then. Okay, so they raised that threshold. Didn't help you all at all. Okay, how many of y'all were considered low-risk auditees? Okay, what did that mean?
No findings?
Well, that's how you got to be there. If you're a low-risk auditee, that means that you don't have to have as much of your programs audited for the coverage requirement under, now that's a term, again, we're going to understand in a minute. You're supposed to have subjected to an audit as a major program at least 50% of your total federal financial expenditures. Okay, but now we're going to drop that. It's going to drop to 40%. If you're a low-risk auditee, right now it's 25%, it's going to drop to 20%.
Yeah, but how do you get there? How
Well,
do you get to be a low audit?
By having no findings, and that's what you're saying. Well, not necessarily. Now, I'm not sure I have this in here. If I do I have some stuff in here that will work for that, but we go through a lot more detail in Audit LEA because there are some things right now that are spread out throughout A133, a little bit here, a little bit here and stuff. Most of it right here, then we add the other part in there. So there are some guidelines on that. But I also can, as your auditor, take exception to them. For instance, if we had a finding last year that you did not do a very good job of selecting the students that were supposed to participate in a Title I program, but in the meantime you went school-wide. See, under school-wide you don't have to select the students. Who gets to participate? Everybody. Student body in general gets to participate. So if my finding said you missed some people that should have been participating, or you included some people that should not have been participating, then I would have had a finding. Depending on how severe it was, I'd have to write it up. But now, since you've gone school-wide, I can say, all right, I had a finding last year, but it doesn't even apply this year. There's no way to apply it. I'm going to forget that. So I have some leeway here in what I can determine. I do or I don't do. I can make that determination on my own. Now, what if Jesus is my peer reviewer? And so he comes in and says, Bruce, you know, you had a finding last year, but then you still consider him a low-risk auditee. And I say, yeah, but that was a finding on something that doesn't apply anymore. And he said, well, I'm not sure I agree with the way you've interpreted that. See, he and I can differ. Ordinarily, the AICPA says they will defer to the professional judgment of the auditor who has knowledge of a lot more of the information than the reviewer. Okay? So most of the time, when I make that decision, we're okay. But on the other hand, if he's my peer reviewer, I'm going to want to make sure I take good care of him, because he's going to write up a report on me, and if he says, Bruce is really incredibly liberal with his interpretations of this stuff, I think this school needs a completely new audit. You know, then I have a report going into AICPA that could threaten my license or the Texas State Board. Okay, in fact, a couple years ago, somebody came up to me and he said, did you know so-and-so was not a CPA? And I said, no, I didn't. He said, well, she's not a CPA anymore, and yet she's been auditing schools as a non-CPA for about 5 years. I said, what's going to happen now? And he said, well, we got all of our audits, and we have to go back and redo 4 years. Now, if you were a school manager, would you be happy to have them come back in and audit all that stuff again? Who would pay for that? Would you? Would I take it out of my skin and do the audit for free? No, that ain't going to happen, folks. So you say, well, let's sue the old CPA and try to get them to pay for it. But if she's broke, what are you going to get for it? Okay, then, you know, just potential problems here with this. So I don't want to make Jesus mad. He's going to come in and review me. I don't want him to be angry with me. I want him to say, yeah, I agree. And in fact, when some people call me and say, what should I do on something, sometimes I'll say, call your peer reviewer and get them to give you a ruling. Because they're going to come in and check you later, see if they agree. I'm very often I'll be happy to give them my personal opinion, and then I say, contact your peer reviewer and see if they'll concur. And if they don't, follow your peer reviewer, because I'm not grading you. That's their job. Okay, well, now we've gone through that. You can see that's all A133 right there. That whole big section there on yellow. And now we end up with all the appendices. And you can see I didn't yellow out all the appendices. Well, yes, I did. All the ones that were for A87. But there are some other appendices there for a variety of things that I didn't put in yellow. But the point is, we're now at the end of this crosswalk, where we're going from what we're doing right now, from what we're going to be doing to where did we get that stuff. And that's what we're going to do. This, I think, is going to be a really valuable reference for you to keep around. And in fact, what I would suggest you might consider doing is sharing it with your federal programs director. Do they need to be competent too? Now, I'm sure some of you, in fact, I saw a face a minute ago that said, they ought to be, but they're not. You know, they have to do some of this choice too. And so they're kind of in the bag with us. So I'm going to leave this one now and go to the, well, in your manual, the next slide is number 19. And you notice it says, see pages 26 through 44. Okay? And so I'm not going to leave this one because I'm already enlarged for it. So let's go on in here to page 26. The full text of the proposed OMB guidance, proposed guidance. Right? This is everything that I could find on OMB's website effective about the 1st of February. This is the full text of it. And so you remember in the introductory material, I had the URL. The URL takes you to this point. So you can pick this up, and now this will give you everything. A87, 133, 110, it gives you all of them. They've all been combined there. However, it doesn't say this must be implemented now. See, that's my question. When do we implement this? And I'm not really totally positive on that. Hey, Susie, you weren't here when I asked people on that. Have you seen something that says this has to be implemented now? Okay, I haven't either. But ask your independent auditor, who's your auditor? Okay, ask them. Chuck Abel? Oh, okay, yeah. Y'all ask your auditors, do you know when this has to be implemented? Because if it doesn't have to be implemented right now, then put it aside and we'll do this same program next year, in the next year, whenever they finally get around to it. All right, so now you're going to see these chapters are laid out essentially the same way our new stuff, old stuff was a while ago. So I'm not going to take as much time going through all this stuff. Remember pre-award stuff, and we go on down until we get to, well, here are those definitions for various costs that we have. And we're going to go down until we get to, what is that? A133 in it. That's a single audit act right there in that one little package. So we don't have to go looking for it in a zillion different places. That was what OMB wanted to do, was consolidate all of this so you didn't have to spend time looking for stuff when it should be better organized for you. And in fact, that is one of the administrative guidelines that they have for what they've been doing. Okay, so now, look what we do. We ought to go into a little bit more detail on 133 right now. The first part there is, of course, general stuff. And then it goes in, and that general stuff says, Congress passed this act, and we're required to do this, and the chief of OMB, what is that person called? The head of OM Management and Budget, I can't even remember what his name is now. At any rate, it gives them the appropriate citations there. And then you go on down here to the audits. Here's who has to have an audit. It goes through some details on who has to have an audit. This is where you're going to find the $750,000 item in there, where it says audit requirements, basis for determining audits expended. That says what was spent. Now, if we consume commodities in the cafeteria, that's called an expenditure. That would be considered one, even though it's not a cash expenditure. For schools, that's about the only thing I can think of that you have that's not a cash expenditure. Can you think of anything else that you have? Sorry, your job is easy there too, isn't it? Do you get a report on what the commodities were worth? You get that, don't you? So it's pretty easy to say, we spent this, that comes out of trial balance, and we took this off the shelves in our warehouse and served it to the kiddies, added together, and you've got your total financial assistance there. So it's an easy thing for us to do. And y'all have already determined that you have to do this anyway. I'm guessing that's because you're so new, you never had any doubts about it to begin with. You knew you were going to have to do it. All right, so then we go here to auditees. What is the auditee supposed to do? Auditee's responsibilities. Well, the first thing you have to do is hire your auditor. Now, who in the auditee's organization do you think is doing that? That's the board of trustees, isn't it? They're the ones that write the employment part. Do you all get a chance to make a recommendation to your board about who should be your auditor?
Absolutely.
I hope you do. I hope you do. There are places where that doesn't happen. And if the auditor is kind of forced on the auditee, I think that's a formula for a disaster. But, you know, sometimes that happens. I've known it to happen in the state a number of times. All right, then we go to the next one there, financial statements. You all are responsible for all the financial statements. It says that in here, okay? I, as your independent auditor, am not responsible for those. Now, that's the key word, responsible. I can prepare them for you if you take responsibility for them without impairing my independence. Okay? Now, I heard somebody just recently saying, well, the auditor can't prepare the financial statements anymore for the auditee. That's not true. And it has never been true even though we've had people at the national level that have announced that it is true, it's simply not true. It has never been true. The auditor can prepare for the auditee. More recently, the guidelines said if the auditee accepts responsibility for it, and now we're saying if the auditee accepts responsibility for it and the auditor knows they're capable of accepting it. That's what's the big change. That's what's the big change this year. So the other part's not true, and as I said, it never has been true. Okay, so now we go here to the financial statements. Audit findings, follow-up. You're responsible for that. I find that you did this. And you said, well, yeah, I guess you're right. We did do that. Now, where do you do that? Where do you do that? Is that in your financial statements anyplace? Yeah. You remember right after my letter, and I say I have the following findings, and then you have the status of prior audit findings and the corrective action plan.
Now, you're in the single audit act report, right?
Well, for us, it's the audit report for all of us here. Because y'all said you all were subject to single audit act audit.
It's not a,
Well, now, it could be. It could be. If it's not, it's because you've chosen not to put it there. But then you file a separate single audit report. Okay, you can do that.
We had two
Now,
separate reports.
I'm sorry?
We had two separate reports.
They don't have to be, though.
Oh.
They don't have to be now. Now, who gives you the CAFR, the Certificate of Achievement? GFOA? Okay, they will accept you're putting that other stuff in there now. They didn't used to, but they will now. It's just like they didn't used to accept you're putting the data control codes in, but they do now. Okay, they didn't used to do that, but they do now. And in fact, well, I can show you a number of school districts that have it all in one report. Northeast ISD in San Antonio, United ISD in Laredo, Corpus Christi ISD, Dallas ISD. You know, I can go through a big list of schools where they put that together. In fact, I give you one too. Have y'all ever heard of New Deal, Texas? Nah, no one has. That's a little bitty town just north of Lubbock. Why was it named New Deal? Because the first people that settled there were following the New Deal provisions of Franklin Roosevelt. And so they organized it and they named it New Deal, Texas. But they have a young man who's their business manager, and he gets that Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting and has for years, and is rightfully very proud of it. At least at one time, he was the smallest governmental entity in the United States to get the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And so you can do that. You don't choose not to do that, and that's just fine. That's not a problem at all. Who's your auditor? No, I'm not going to get him in trouble. Whitney Penn? All right. How many of you have Whitney Penn as the auditor? Holy smoke, they're covering the plains here, aren't they? Did anybody have, let's see. Well, no, we don't need to do a poll like that.
Hereford Lynch.
Hereford Lynch? Yeah, did much of you have Hereford Lynch? Okay. All very good firms. They want you to put them in separate documents, but you don't have to. You can do that. All right, well, so now.
Actually, isn't there some advantages of keeping them separate?
There used to be, but there isn't anymore as far as I can see. Why would there be an advantage?
When we get a findings.
Well,
It's a free audit act, but it's not in the capital.
yeah. However, if you have a single audit, you also have to have the yellow book. If there is a finding in the Single Audit Act, there better be one in the yellow book too. Okay, so I don't see any advantage there.
We haven't had any findings.
So yeah, so you're nice. You know, you haven't had any findings. You say, well, we're just right along fine. That's good. Remember what I said was the easiest exam to grade? Y'all are on the other side of that scale. They flunked, they didn't do anything, they didn't fill out anything. Y'all are on the A side, where it's the second easiest to do. You're the second easiest audit to prepare. Okay, so the point is you don't have to put them that way, and especially not with TEA. TEA used to like them separately, but now they would just as soon have them all together in one report. Again, you don't have to do that, but they like to have it done that way. How many of you all got caught up in the deal about finalizing your financial statements before you submitted them to TEA, before January the 28th, finalizing the balances in your audit data feed? Did you have problems with that? A lot of people did have problems with that. And when we first heard about it, we got a letter from one of our customers in Central Texas, and she said she had just talked to someone at TEA, and they said that you had to finalize that if you didn't have it done by January 28th. No, at this time it was by November 27th, that you would flunk first and everything. They said that. So we called and said, is that true? And they said, that's true. And we said, well, they used to give us 30-day grace on that. She replied, no, the law has never given a 30-day grace, and you don't get it. And we said, well, right here, if you look in your first guideline, remember on item 4, right there under item 4, it says you get 30 days. She said, no, that never did apply. I thought, well, I was there. I'm sorry? Well, sure, yeah, and I was talking to Tom Candy when they installated that. Y'all remember Tom Candy? Yeah. Everybody? How come everybody knows Tom Candy? He is, yeah, really a very capable guy. I was talking to Tom Candy about that's when we first went to GASB 34. He said we're going to extend 150 days. It used to be 90 days, no, 120 days after the end of, and we're going to extend it 150. And if people need the extra 30, they get it. So they extended it then, and they've done that forever until this year. And so then we sent out our letter. Are any of y'all on my mailing list? You got the letter from us? We said this is, you need to know this right away, because we had about 10 days at Thanksgiving time. 10 days at Thanksgiving to do all this correction. And so then later on we talked to Paul Moreno. Everybody know Paul Moreno by chance? He's the guy that data feed goes to, and he said, well, yeah, that's what they tell me from that other department. So, and we have this in email, it's in writing, you know, we can't back up on history there. So we had that, and that's when we sent out our letter, and then somebody else checked, and the people at TA said, no, they got it wrong, we never did say that. The hell they did. It was right. It was in writing, you know, you did say that. You said it very plainly. And but then they backed off, they went back to 30 days. So y'all got your 30 days back. Okay, which means in, what, about 2 weeks, if you don't have it in, then you flunk. All right, if you don't have it in 2 weeks, then you ought to flunk, I suppose. Right? Okay, no big deal. The point is, y'all are responsible for doing those financial statements, and whether they are single audit or the regular CAFR. And so now, since you are responsible for those, you are, well, let's see, where did I find that? Audit responsibility, audit find, follow up, and that's where we got off the track there, isn't it? And then the report submission, y'all are responsible for that. How about on your data feed for the Bureau of Budget? Are y'all responsible for that? Yeah, I'll give you a hint. That's what the auditors define. That's when we decide that this is a Single Audit Act audit, or it could be a program-specific audit. I don't know of any school in Texas that has ever had a program-specific audit. Do y'all know what that is? We just take a particular program and do an audit on that. Do you know of anyone that's ever done that? I don't either. Now, I have seen it happen with cities from time to time. In fact, I think the city of Eagle Pass, if I'm not mistaken, they have a bridge that goes over to Mexico. And it's jointly owned by the Mexican government and the U.S. government, I believe. And so they had some kind of joint responsibility for the bridge there. And so they had a program-specific audit for that bridge. But most of the time, we don't have that in schools. And so let's see, if we go on down here, scope of the audit, audit reporting, who's responsible for the audit report? The auditor. Only the auditor. That's my letter. That's not your letter. And that's my first report, you know, the basic one, that's mine. My report on the yellow book, that's mine. My report on A133, that's mine. I ask you to do the corrective action plan, that's yours. Then I ask you to report the status of prior corrective actions, that's yours. The part that's called the schedule of findings and question costs, that's mine. Okay. Aside from that, everything else in that report belongs to you. That all belongs to the school district. So, did I do it right? What happens if you look at it and you say, I don't think Bruce did that right? Do you have reports on that? You bet you do. You bet you do. Do any of y'all know a guy named George Scott, who was a partner with Deloitte & Touche in this area? Okay. George, you know, he still looks like he's 12 years old. He's looked that way forever. But George Scott, I asked him that question, what do you do if you find that your auditor did not do a good job? He said, well, first thing is you don't pay for it. And I've always remembered that. I don't remember what he said the second thing he did was. But I just remember that. And he said that it happens, and we know it happens. Well, like the woman that audited when she wasn't a CPA. Okay, so sometimes that happens. So then we go here, and let's jump on down and get that one.
Hey, Bruce.
Yes, sir.
Do you recall how many years she was doing that? It was a long time. What?
It was 4 years that I know of. No, five that I know of. They had to recover 4 years. Now, I don't think she did it long before that, though. I don't think she did it. She had some struggles. She had a brother that got murdered, and you know, there were some problems that were affiliated with that. So I don't know any more of the details than that. Okay, let's look at the major program determination. Okay, because that's really where we're down to now. That's what I think we need to spend some time on. And so I'm going to just kind of skip through the rest of this one, and guess what our next handout is going to be there? Well, these are all parts of this gigantic document, but it has other things, allowable cost and stuff like that. Until we get to, oh, well, let's see, what's this? Oh yeah, this is A87 basically, the cost allocation plans. And finally, well, here we are. This is major program determination. And it's on your page 39 in your manual. Okay, there are two things that we do here. The first thing is we divide all of our federal programs into big programs and little programs. We're going to call the big ones type A and the little ones type B. And here's where we're making a change. Right now, the cutoff for that is $300,000. Any program that has at least $300,000 spent in that program may be a type A program, a big program. Now, I say maybe, that's because in Houston, you're going to raise that way up because it's 3% of your total federal financial assistance or $300,000, whichever is largest. Now, how many of y'all are over, what would 3%, what would you have to have for your total federal financial assistance to get above 300,000? 10 million. If we go to 10 million, 3% of 10 million is 300,000, right? So if you get more than 10 million in federal financial assistance, your type A cutoff is going to move upward. How many of you get more than 10 million? Okay. How many of you get more than 50 million? Anybody get more than 100 million? Okay. Houston, y'all are the big guys in the room here. Okay, so this goes up. Your threshold goes up. So, but I always just use 300,000 for abbreviation instead of saying 300,000 or 3%, whichever is biggest. You know, I say 300,000. So let's start there. Everything above that is type A. Everything below that is type B. Now then, the next thing that we do, that's called our size test there, and it gives you a lot more detail on that here in this because it tells you, okay, it's 3% or then as that goes up, then they cut that percentage down a bit. So, you know, it's moving up quite a bit there until we get to our step 1, that's where we divide them into A and B. And then in step 2, we're going to divide them into risky and not risky. Okay? So a federal program will be, if it is a type A low-risk program, in other words, it's big, but not very risky, then we're going to put it on the shelf for the time being, because it may not be a major program. We're going to have to do some other testing before we decide it's a major program. And so what is the other testing? Well, we're going to get all of our type A programs, and every one of our type A programs that's low risk we'll put on the shelf for the time being. Then we'll go to our type B programs, and now we're looking for all the programs that are high risk. Remember, type A low risk is on the shelf. Type A high risk can come in and replace a type A low risk. Now, in the past, that replacement has had kind of a process where you had to do a certain number, but now they've simplified that process. You have to bring in a type B high risk for each type A low risk, up to 25% of the total type A low risk you put on the shelf. It used to be you would do an equal amount. The same number of high risk type B came in for the number of low risk type A's. So we bring those into the system. And then once we've brought those into our system here for the high risk and the low risk, then we're going to add everything that we've picked out as a major program at that stage. So the type A low risk has been put on the shelf. We get all the type A non-low risk. Now, I didn't say type A high risk. I said type A non-low risk. It's the low risk that's the key there. And we're going to bring in a type B high risk, not a type B kind of risky. It's type B high risk. So the high risk small ones replace the low risk big ones coming in here. And so we bring those in, and at that stage we add up all of the total federal expenditures in those two categories. If that amount turns out to be more than 50% of our total federal financial assistance, then that is our list of major programs. We quit right there. Okay? We just quit right there. Now, that, as far as I know, that figure has not changed. I don't remember that it has changed. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I think that was dropped to 40%, but instead of 50%, but I'm not sure. So I'll need to check that. So anyway, we brought those in. Those are now our major programs. What if it isn't 50%? Then we bring in a type A low risk to bring up our total. We don't bring in the next type B high risk. We bring in a type A low risk to bring this up. So now, let me ask you, most school districts in Texas, one of their major programs is Title I. Right, is that about your biggest one? How many of y'all have, let's say total federal expenditures under $20 million? Okay, then I want to talk mostly with y'all because we'll be moving on. Is Title I one of your biggest? It is for you. Food service, another big one? Okay, special ed, another big one? You're okay. And then, do you have any others that would be in the big category? That's it, all right? So see, once I'm going to do Title I, the next year I'm going to do IDB, and the next year I'm going to do food service, and then the next year I'm going to do Title I, IDB, food service, Title I, IDB, food service, and then whatever the small programs are that I need to bring in there, I'll be bringing those in, and that's going to be my major programs, okay? So there's a good chance that even major programs only get audited once every 3 years. And as far as I can tell from what I read here with OMB, they're not making an effort to change that. They're happy enough with that. They did say what we ought to do on our Type B is we ought to rotate those around a little bit. How many smaller grants do you have? Two?
State grants, federal.
Okay.
2, 3.
Then there's just not much change that you can do there, right? Can you tell me what your major program is going to be next year?
Title I, because we did food service this year.
Okay. And what were yours? Okay. Can the rest of you tell me what your major programs are going to be next year? Can you plan for them? I know this is what's going to happen. I get my federal programs director out here and I say, let's help you with this to make sure that when the auditor comes, you're ready to go. And you go through and you get that all planned. Auditor comes in and says, all right, they get an A, and they're out of there. Believe me, the nicest thing in the world is when the auditor leaves. You say, I'm glad to see you here when they come, but you're really glad to see them go when they go. Okay, so you see, this major program thing is really pretty easy, and we're responsible for being ready for them. We're not responsible for picking that, but we can pretty well tell what it's going to be. Okay, well, now then, what else do we need to do there? That's our major program. Well, they have a bunch of other things here that, remember I said that we've made some slight tweaks on some stuff. So for instance, if we're a university, and I know you all aren't, but if you're a university and you have a large student loan program that basically makes the student loan a major program and cuts out some of the others that would have otherwise been a major program. For instance, let's say that we have $50 million in student loans and $400,000 in Title I. See, that $50 million is going to cause Title I to be a Type D program, isn't it? So if you have a situation like that where it's a gigantic program that is otherwise relatively insignificant or unimportant or unrisky, tilts the whole thing, then the new guidelines say take that one out and consider your operation without that one in it. Take it out and put the rest of it in. So now we've done that. We are going to make that tweak. We're going to raise the amounts from 750 to, I'm sorry, 500,000 to 750, and we're going to raise it from 300,000, I think, to 500,000. I think that's going to be our new cutoff. And then we're going to have, we'll have 40% coverage. No, I'm sorry. I think it's still going to be 50% coverage. But now the next thing is, am I a low-risk auditee? And the guidelines there are, if I am one, and I have to pass some things, they're listed in here. If I pass the conditions that make me a low-risk auditee, then all I have to have for that percent of coverage is 20%. It is 40%. I was right. It has been lowered to 40%. So now, if I'm a low-risk auditee, all the auditor has to cover is 20% of the total federal financial assistance. Makes it easier for the auditor. And have you all had any findings? See? There's no point in going out there and doing a whole bunch of auditing when they're not going to have a finding, is there? Is Title I an easy program to do? If you're school-wide. What else is there to do on school-wide? Every student counts, every expenditure counts. You know, there's just so very little control that you have to implement over Title I that it's really basically an easy program. Is food service easy? Well, kind of. You know, they give you so many manuals and menus and stuff like that that it's relatively easy. But is special ed easy? No. Special ed is a tough one. But not at the federal level. Okay? The compliance supplement for special ed says the auditor is not responsible for determining the eligibility of participants in special ed. At the state level, is the auditor responsible for auditing the way the membership in special ed is determined? Yes. For your state special ed program, the auditor has to check the way you've done your selection of students that participate in it. They should be looking at some evidence related to your student files, their membership files. Okay, well, let's see. What's the next thing we need to do here? We've figured out what's a major program, and so I think probably I'm skimming through this because we've already talked about all this, although I wasn't following with the text. And, oh, here's one that I did want to put in here. You remember earlier I said if you are a single audit place, you also have to comply with the yellow book. See that sole GAGAS there in the middle of the page? GAGAS stands for Generally Accepted Government Auditing Standards. And if you are a single audit client, you must also have a yellow book audit. That's essentially what that one says. So that's why when we get together with these You can't say, well, I'm just single audit, I don't have to do Yellow Book. And then when you go look at the Yellow Book, what the Yellow Book does is pick up your regular finance stuff too. Because we're looking at the internal controls over all of your operations, financial operations, not just your federal financial operations. Okay, then let me see, let me go down here a little bit further. And now we're at the auditee worksheet. Okay? I think we're near the end, and I bet there are a bunch of you all that are saying, oh, thank God. Okay, yeah, there are a few things. I may or may not talk about some other things here in a little bit, but this is the worksheet that comes from the Government Audit Quality Center. Now, if you read through that, let's see, the first one says current title or grant title. Does that have to be on your CFO, the grant title? We saw it on there, didn't we? Yeah. Okay, the next thing, federal program name, does that have to be on there? Yeah. Next thing, award number, that's the CFP. Go down through this, and we've already done it all, haven't we? Look at that whole worksheet there. Now, it gets very, very complicated, but there's something also here that's very helpful to you, and that is the evaluation thing at the end of this. Right down here. This one, did we do it? Yes, no, not applicable. And you go through there and check off, yes, we've done it. We're doing it correctly. And we're ready for our auditors to jump in here and take a look at what we're doing. And we know we're going to get a passing grade. You can do it. Yes, sir.
Going back to the major, non-major, you said that you put the type A low risk on the shelf.
If it's low risk.
Right.
Only if it's low risk.
Right. And then you got to substitute with some B high risk.
That's right.
25% of what? 25% what do you put on the bin? Put on the
When
shelf?
we put any type A non-low risk is major. Any type B high risk that we brought in to replace a type A low risk is a major program. We add all of that up, and if that is equal to 25, if you're a low risk auditee, if that's equal to 25% of your total federal financial assistance, that's it. You don't have to go any further. That is your major program. If it's not equal to 25%, then we have to go pick up one of the type A low risk and bring it in until we get to 25%. Okay? And so my guess is most of you all are going to be like they were, where you have one that comes in every year on a 3-year cycle, and maybe a few small ones, and you're done with that. And those of you who are very, very large that have lots of grants, I think you're going to see that they tend to cycle through in a similar way. You're almost always going to have certain ones. Like Title I is almost always going to be once every 3 years. And that's because it's relatively low risk. Okay. All right, well, now here's your check sheet there. You can just check right off. Now, let me take just a minute to do a couple more things, if you don't mind. I passed out a deal at the beginning because remember I said I forgot to put that one in. Actually, I didn't know to put that one in. Right after I had sent the handout to Liz, Ellen came in and said, TEA has a new maintenance of effort thing for Idea B on the website. And this is the instruction sheet for that. They also have a template on the website. And what's going to happen now is this is going to be very different from what it's been in the past, at least for this first year. Now, you remember last year, TA basically forgave everybody from doing tests for maintenance of effort for Idea B. They didn't test any of it, and so if you screwed up last year, you got by with murder. But and that's good. I'm proud of you. But now, here's the weird thing. They said, all right, we have this test, but now what we're going to do, we've done some work and we've brought this new project in here. And now that we have this new project in here, Notice at the top it says for 2014 and beyond. Isn't that what it says? And future, what does it say at the top of that? Later, okay. So, but what they want you to do is go back and test 2012 and see if you would have been compliant using these new guidelines. And then I don't know what they want you to do if you say, oh damn, I wouldn't have been. I'm in big trouble now. And all you can say is, well, thank goodness they missed that one. Ella she was taking an economics course and she had some sickness and wasn't able to do very well in the final. And the professor grabbed the finals and went and hopped on the airplane and flew to someplace. Y'all remember Braniff Airlines? Anybody? Okay, well, he flew Braniff, and Braniff lost his luggage and lost her exam. She said, I know I flunked that sucker, but he wasn't there, and so he gave them the grades they had going in, which were good grades. I never was that lucky. They lost all my A exams. You know, every exam I ever took that was an A, they lost it. But at any rate, if you got by last year without having to get beaten up with maintenance of effort, now this year you go back and check. Elma, did they say what you're supposed to do if you find out you've been compliant?
They said in the instructions on the template that if you find you weren't compliant, they have sent out letters in 2013. If you run this test and see you were not in compliant, then what you use for this year is 2012 and 2014. You use those numbers to run to see if you're going to be compliant with the
Okay, all right, well, so maybe you're catching another break, I'm not sure. And what I think is the very surprising thing is, I don't think TEA is very sure either. I think they're saying, where are we now? Well, we're somewhere in the middle of the Gulf. Okay, well, thank you for being my Valentine for an awful long time. Wow, I appreciate it. If you have questions, then by all means, shoot me an email, or I think, yeah, on the last slide here, I had a bunch of contacts. It has my email and phone number and stuff like that.